Tonight, we're examining the weirdest unsolved mysteries of the Pokémon world. There is a lot to explore here, but I'll keep the pacing gentle so you can still settle in and fall asleep. Thank you to those of you who've been joining us consistently. If you're falling asleep with us tonight, let me know in the comments how many nights in a row you've been here. And if this is your first night, just comment night 1. Now back to the video. Imagine, if you will, a world that looks remarkably like our own, yet is fundamentally tilted on its axis. It is a world of bright colors, of friendship, and of the shared bond between humans and the creatures that inhabit the tall grass. On the surface, the Pokémon world is a utopia. It is a place where 10-year-old children can wander across entire continents with nothing but a backpack and a dream, protected by the very monsters they seek to tame. But as the sun sets over the Kanto plains and the neon lights of Celadon City begin to flicker, a different kind of reality starts to bleed through the edges of the map. This is the world of institutional silence. It is a world where the governments, the Pokémon League, and the shadowy corporations like Sylph Company and the Aether Foundation seem to have reached a collective agreement to never speak of the things that truly matter. They provide us with a Pokédex, a digital encyclopedia that claims to hold all the answers. Yet when you read between the lines, you realize the Pokédex is less of a scientific journal and more of a collection of warnings, folklore, and terrifying gaps in human knowledge. We have spent over 25 years exploring these regions, from the jagged peaks of Mount Silver to the tropical reaches of Alola, and yet, the more we see, the less we truly understand. We are told that Pokémon are our partners, our friends, and our tools, but we are never told exactly what they are. We are never told where they came from, or what the world looked like before we began catching them in spheres of metal and light. There are ghosts in this machine, not just the spectral Pokémon that haunt the towers of Lavender Town, but historical ghosts. These are the fragments of stories that were started and then abruptly abandoned by the people who created this universe. There are artifacts that remain sealed, characters who have vanished without a trace, and biological anomalies that defy every law of nature we think we know. When you sit in the quiet of your room, the blue light of a handheld console illuminating your face, you start to notice the things that don't add up. You notice the way the music in certain towns seems to carry a frequency that shouldn't exist. You notice the way the older men in the gyms talk about a war that supposedly never happened, or the way a mother waits forever in a small house for a husband who never returns. These aren't just minor plot holes or technical limitations of 1996 hardware. They are the scars of a world that has seen things it would rather forget. There is a weight to these mysteries, a heavy, melancholic atmosphere that settles over you when you realize that some questions will never be answered. The developers have moved on. The anime has shifted its focus. The world has grown larger, but the shadows in the corners of the original maps have only grown darker. Tonight, we are going to step into those shadows. We are going to look at the things that were meant to be hidden. We will talk about the GS Ball, a golden mystery that sat on a shelf for decades, representing a promise that the world simply forgot to keep. We will discuss the biological horror of the Ditto and its whispered connection to the ancestor of all Pokémon, a theory that suggests our most beloved companions might be the result of experiments gone horribly wrong. We will walk through the tall grass of the Kanto region and ask ourselves why there are so many hospitals and so few people of a certain age, looking for the footprints of a war that stained the land before we ever took our first steps out of Pallet Town. We will look at the glitches, the entities like MissingNo that shouldn't exist but do, floating in the digital void like a ghost of the game's own incomplete soul. Is it just corrupted data? Or is it a window into the fragility of the Pokémon reality itself? We will encounter the ghost girl of Kalos, a spectral figure who wanders the hallways of Lumiose City with no explanation, no dialogue, and no resolution, serving as a chilling reminder that in this world, some spirits are simply lost, and no one is coming to find them. The stakes of these mysteries are higher than they might appear at first glance. For many of us, the Pokémon world was our first experience with a grand, overarching narrative. It was the first time we felt like explorers in a land that was truly alive. To discover that this land is filled with unresolved tragedies and institutional cover-ups changes the way we look at our childhood. It turns a simple game into a complex, eerie tapestry of the unknown. Why does Cubone wear a skull? And why is the world so silent about the mother it lost? Why does the Pokémon League allow children to carry gods in their pockets? What is the true nature of the energy that powers a Pokéball? And why is there no scientific record of how a living creature is compressed into a beam of light? The silence is deafening. It is a silence maintained by the developers at Game Freak, who leave these breadcrumbs for us to find, but never lead us to the end of the trail. It is a silence maintained by the characters in the games, who act as if the world is perfectly normal, even when a literal hole in reality opens up in the sky. This video is an attempt to break that silence, or at least to sit with it for a while. We aren't looking for easy answers tonight, because in the Pokémon world, there are no easy answers. We are looking for the feeling of the mystery itself. We are looking for the beauty in the ambiguity. As we move through these chapters, I want you to imagine the wind blowing through the ruins of the burned tower. I want you to feel the cold, sterile air of a secret laboratory under the sea. I want you to hear the static of a radio, tuned to a frequency that hasn't been used in 1,000 years. We are going back to the beginning, to the regions we thought we knew, to find the things we were never supposed to see. We are diving into the lore that was left on the cutting room floor, the theories that have kept fans awake for decades, and the eerie reality of a world where the most powerful creatures on Earth are also the most mysterious. This is not just a journey through a video game franchise. It is a journey into the heart of a modern myth. It is an exploration of how we create stories, how we fill in the gaps with our own fears and wonders, and how a world built for children can contain some of the most haunting imagery in all of fiction. The white hand that shouldn't be there, the buried zombie that was scrubbed from the code, the father who is nothing more than a ghost in a conversation. These are the pillars of the Pokémon mystery, so let the world outside fade away. Let the sounds of your surroundings dim until all that's left is the steady rhythm of this story. We are going to travel across regions and across time, looking for the truth behind the curtain. We are going to ask the questions that the Pokémon League wants us to ignore. We are going to look into the eyes of the creatures we thought were our friends and wonder what they are really thinking when they look back at us from inside their spherical prisons. This is a deep dive into the void, a quiet walk through a haunted history, and a tribute to the mysteries that remain unsolved. Let's begin the search for the truth in a world that would rather stay silent. We start our journey in the place where the darkness first took root, a place that every trainer remembers with a certain sense of unease, a town defined not by its gym or its shops, but by its graves. We are going back to the Kanto region, back to the year 1996, to a small, purple-tinted village nestled in the mountains. This is where the music changes, where the air grows cold, and where the first great mysteries of the Pokémon world were born. The fog is rolling in over the headstones of the Pokémon Tower, and something is moving in the shadows of the upper floors. Something that wasn't meant to be caught, something that wasn't even meant to be seen. The history of this world is a series of layers. On the top, you have the bright, optimistic journey of a young trainer, but beneath that, there is a layer of sorrow, a layer of glitchy, corrupted reality, and a layer of ancient, unspoken conflict. Tonight, we peel back those layers one by one. We will look at the biological anomalies that suggest Pokémon might be more artificial than we were led to believe. We will look at the celestial beings that existed before time itself, and the strange, quiet moments where the game seems to acknowledge that it is, in fact, a haunted piece of software. The institutional silence is about to be challenged, not with loud declarations, but with the soft, persistent pressure of our curiosity. We are going to examine the evidence, the rumors, and the abandoned plans of the creators. We are going to find the ghosts of the Pokémon world, and for the first time, we are going to really listen to what they have to say. From the GS ball that never opened to the war that was never declared, the truth is out there, hidden in the code and the subtext. It is a journey that will take us to the very edge of the map, to the places where the data starts to break down and the legends begin to feel a little too real. So settle in. Close your eyes if you wish, or watch the flickering images of a world you thought you knew. We are going deep into the weirdest unsolved mysteries of the Pokémon world, and we aren't coming back until we've seen everything the shadows have to offer. The journey is long, the pacing is gentle, and the mysteries are waiting. It is time to uncover what has been hidden for over 2 decades. It is time to face the silence. The Pokémon world is a paradox. On the surface, it is a place of boundless wonder, a world where children set out on journeys, with creatures that can control the weather, reshape continents, or warp the fabric of time itself. Yet beneath that cheerful veneer lies a silence so deep it feels deliberate. The Pokémon League, the governing body that oversees trainers, gyms, and the very rules of this universe, maintains a vast archive of knowledge. But that archive is not complete. There are gaps. Entire chapters of history have been quietly removed, or perhaps never written down at all. This is the veil of institutional silence, and it hangs over every region like a fog you cannot quite see through. Consider the way the world treats its most powerful beings. A child can catch a legendary Pokémon, a creature said to have created the universe, or to have brought life to the planet, and keep it in a pocket-sized sphere. That same child can then deposit that godlike entity into a computer storage system, where it waits alongside a Pidgey and a Rattata. The sheer absurdity of this arrangement is never questioned. The media celebrates trainers who capture these mythic beings, and the League hands out badges as if nothing extraordinary has happened. The only explanation is that the world has been conditioned to see these entities as just another species, another tool for battle. But that conditioning had to come from somewhere. Someone decided that the truth, the terrifying, beautiful truth about what these creatures really are, should be obscured. The government of Kanto, and by extension the other regions, systematically withholds the origins of legendary Pokémon. They do not teach the full history in schools. The Pokédex entries are deliberately vague, often ending with phrases like "it is said" or "according to legend." The word myth is used as a shield. But why? The answer lies in the nature of control. A populace that understands the true power of the beings they live alongside might become difficult to manage. Imagine the panic if every trainer knew that the bird outside their window could, if angered, summon a storm that would level an entire city. Better to let them believe it is just a common Pidgey. Better to let them think the legendary birds are rare, but ultimately tameable. The League's official records are redacted, not because the information is lost, but because it is inconvenient. The story of how Arceus came to be, or what truly happened during the war between Kanto and Johto, or why certain Pokémon have abilities that defy the laws of physics. These are not questions that the system once answered, and so they remain unanswered. This is the narrative hook that runs through every unsolved mystery in the Pokémon world. Some questions are intentionally left without answers, not because they are unknowable, but because the truth would unravel the comfortable lie that everyone has agreed to live inside. The eerie calm of a world where massive, godlike creatures are treated as common pets is a fragile one. It is held together by silence. And when you start to look closely, you see the cracks, the missing data, the ghostly figures, the balls that never open, the wars that were never declared. The veil is thin, and the first place it frays is in a town built over the dead. That town is Lavender Town, and the silence there is not just institutional, it is architectural. The way grief is built into every corner of that place tells a story that the League would rather forget. Let us walk into that silence together, because the architecture of grief in Lavender Town reveals more than any official record ever could. We left off in the last chapter, standing at the edge of a world that has learned to look away. The Pokémon League, the professors, the gym leaders, they all speak in the language of scientific neutrality, as if the creatures they study and the battles they choreograph have no history of violence, no memory of pain. But there is one place in Kanto that refuses to forget. One place where the silence is not a policy but a wound. Lavender Town. To reach it, you have to travel south from Cerulean City, past the endless fields of Route 8, past the low stone walls and the wild grass that seems to whisper as you walk. The music changes the moment you cross into the town's border. That infamous melody, a high-pitched, almost dissonant chime that repeats in a loop, never quite resolving, never offering comfort. It is a sound that has been described in the years since the game's release as a binaural frequency, a tone that can trigger headaches, nausea, even hallucinations in young listeners. Whether or not that is medically true is not the point. The point is that the music itself is a barrier. It tells you, even before your eyes adjust to the muted greys of the buildings, that this is not a place for happiness. The town is small, a few houses, a Pokémon Center, a mart. But its heart is the Pokémon Tower, rising from the center like a crooked finger, pointing at a sky that never seems to clear. And the layout of the town is not accidental. Every road, every path, every NPC's position has been designed to funnel you toward that tower. You cannot miss it. You cannot bypass it. The game does not give you a side route, a shortcut, or a reason to delay. You are meant to walk toward the tower, and as you approach, the music grows quieter, as if the town itself is holding its breath. Inside the tower, the architecture of grief becomes literal. The floors are stacked like the levels of a mausoleum. Each floor is darker than the last, the walls closing in, the trainers more desperate, the wild Pokémon more aggressive, as if they are guarding something that should not be disturbed. And on the third floor, you meet the ghosts, not the sprite of a ghost-type Pokémon, but the actual, uncatchable specters that block your path. The game tells you nothing about them. No battle, no dialogue beyond a single line. Give me something nice, or I see you, little one. The NPCs in the town outside, when you speak to them, offer only fragments. One woman says the tower was built to honor the souls of Pokémon that died in the wild. Another mentions a fire. Another says nothing at all, just stares at the ground. Their dialogue suggests a tragedy far deeper than the loss of a single Marowak. They speak of the tower as if it were built on a wound that never healed. And then there is the ghost of the mother Marowak. Most players remember it as a plot point, a sad story about a Cubone whose mother was killed by Team Rocket, leaving the orphan to cry under a rock. But the game's text is deliberately sparse. The ghost does not attack you. It does not explain itself. It simply appears, flickers, and vanishes. And when you finally climb to the top and meet Mr. Fuji, the old man who tends to the graves, he tells you almost nothing. He thanks you for helping the ghost move on, but he never says where the ghost came from, or why the tower hums with that strange frequency. The silence of the NPCs is not a glitch, it is a design choice. They are the living memorials of a town that has learned to live with loss by not speaking of it. But the tower itself, its physical structure, is the true story. It is a children's world, a game where you catch cute monsters in colorful balls, and yet here is a building dedicated entirely to death. The architecture of grief is not a metaphor. It is a set of stairs, a series of narrow hallways, a room where a mother's ghost waits for justice. The town's layout is a funnel, and at the end of the funnel is a confrontation with mortality. Not the mortality of a legendary creature, but of a common, everyday Pokémon. Cubone, the one that wears its mother's skull, the one whose shell hides a secret the game never reveals. And as you leave Lavender Town, the music returns to its high-pitched loop, and you cannot unhear it. You cannot forget the way the tower blocked the sun, the way the NPCs refuse to meet your eyes. The town remains a scar on the map of Kanto, a place where the game's designers chose to create an atmosphere of unresolved mourning, and that atmosphere is built, in part, by the infamous high-pitched frequencies that swirl around the town like incense. But what if those frequencies were not just a sound effect? What if there was a deeper, more hidden layer to the Lavender Town experience? A layer that has been whispered about in forums and late-night discussions for over 20 years. That is the subject of the next chapter, where we will examine the lavender frequency and the myth of illness. From the previous chapter, we carried with us the weight of the Pokémon Tower, that towering monument to loss that sits at the heart of Lavender Town, and the music that tells you something is wrong, long before you see the stories etched into the building itself. That melody is a dirge, a high-pitched lullaby that seems to hang in the air like dust. And it is that same music that gave birth to one of the most persistent and unsettling myths in the entire history of gaming, the so-called Lavender Town Syndrome. The legend, as it spread across early internet forums, was a simple one. Children in Japan, during the late 1990s, were reportedly falling ill after playing Pokémon Red and Green. Headaches, nosebleeds, and in the most extreme cases, hospitalization and even suicide were attributed to a single cause: the music that played in Lavender Town. The story claimed that the theme contained a high-frequency tone, a binaural beat that resonated in the brains of young listeners, inducing seizures and psychological distress. The syndrome became the subject of creepypasta, a shared ghost story that felt real because it tapped into the raw discomfort that the music genuinely creates in so many players. But let us separate the legend from the documented reality. The discomfort is real, but the syndrome is a myth. Yet myths have roots, and the roots of Lavender Town syndrome are worth digging up because they lead us to a fascinating intersection of game design, hardware limitations, and cultural memory. The reality of that root begins inside the sound engine of the Game Boy from 1996. The Game Boy's audio processor was a marvel of constraint. It had 4 channels, 2 pulse wave channels, 1 wave channel for samples, and 1 noise channel. The composer, Junichi Masuda, was a master at squeezing emotion out of those simple beeps. For the Lavender Town theme, he chose a key that pushed the upper limits of the console's range. The melody dances in the higher registers, using frequencies that, when played through the small built-in speaker or cheap headphones, can feel piercing. That discomfort is intentional. The music is meant to unsettle you, to signal that this is a place of grief and the dead. What happened next is where the technical meets the urban legend. When Pokémon Red and Blue were localized for international release, the music in Lavender Town was lowered in pitch. The Japanese original played in the key of B minor. The English versions dropped it down to G sharp minor, something like a semitone or a whole step lower. The difference is subtle, but if you listen back to back, the original can feel more oppressive, more shrill. The change was not made because of reports of illness. It was likely done for a more mundane reason. The sound designer simply felt the piece worked better in a lower register for a broader audience. There is no official documentation of a mandate to prevent seizures. The alteration was an aesthetic choice. But the myth that it was a safety measure took on a life of its own. The idea that the game's developers had to hide a dangerous frequency for the West played perfectly into the narrative of a conspiracy. It made the mystery of the music even deeper, and it overshadowed the story the music was trying to tell. The actual lore of Lavender Town, the narrative buried inside the game's code and dialogue, is far more tragic than any creepypasta. The tower is a memorial for Pokémon that have passed on. The ghosts that appear are literally the spirits of creatures that died, many of them waiting for closure. The most famous ghost, the one that blocks your path, is the spirit of a Marowak that was killed by Team Rocket while protecting her child, Cubone. That Cubone is the same one you find wandering the tower, wearing its mother's skull. The music is not a weapon, it is a funeral song. It is the developer's way of acknowledging death in a world that usually glosses over it. But because the myth of the syndrome spread so widely, the actual grief in the tower is often forgotten. The conversation shifted from, "Why does this music feel so sad?" to, "Did this music make people sick?" The cultural ghost story of Lavender Town syndrome became a legend that explained away the unease, rather than sitting with it. It domesticated the horror by turning it into a health warning. That is why the music's real legacy is not the myth, but the memorial. The melody remains as a tribute to things the developers could not say out loud. In the early games, the word death is almost never used. Pokémon faint, they do not die. But in Lavender Town, death is everywhere. The music is the only language they had to express that. It is a piece that carries the weight of every lost creature, every unfinished journey, and the silence that the Pokémon world wraps around its own tragedies. That silence, though, is not complete. There are other things lurking in the code of Lavender Town, things that were not supposed to remain visible. The music was altered, but there are sprites that were cut, images that were left behind in the data, like echoes. One of them is a decaying hand, pale and skeletal, that was said to appear in early builds of the game. Another is a creature half buried in the ground, a zombified Pokémon that was removed before release. These fragments exist only in memories and partial dumps of old cartridges. And in the next part of our story, we will look directly at those pieces of the code that were never meant to be seen. The white hand and the spectral sprite that still haunts the edges of the known game data. Chapter 4. The White Hand and the Spectral Sprite. The previous chapter closed with the sound of Lavender Town's high-pitched music, the frequencies that some players swear caused headaches, nosebleeds, even seizures. We walk through the technical truth. The Game Boy's limited sound channel, the dissonant melody composed by Junichi Masuda, the altered international release, and we acknowledge that while the so-called Lavender Town syndrome has been debunked as a creepypasta exaggeration, the unease it described was real. That unease did not vanish when you turned off the game. It lingered. Because Lavender Town was built over a graveyard, and because some things in that game were never meant to be seen, now we descend deeper into the code itself, beyond the music, beyond the ghost you can defeat with a sylph scope, to Sprite that was never meant to surface, a fragment of data that exists in the margins of version 1.0, a leftover from an era when the Pokémon world was darker, when the line between cute monster and human horror had not yet been drawn. This is the story of the White Hand. The White Hand is not a Pokémon. It is not a glitch like MissingNo, born from broken memory addresses. It is a deliberate piece of art. A hand, rendered in a style that clashes violently with the chibi sprites and friendly monsters around it. In the earliest prototypes of Pokémon Red and Green, before the game was finalized, there was a plan for the Pokémon Tower to have a boss encounter unlike any other. Not a ghost-type Pokémon, not a trainer, a humanoid figure half buried in the earth, reaching up with a single decaying hand. The sprite sheets that survive in fan archives show a hand with 5 fingers, each joint visible, the skin pale and mottled, the nails cracked. It looks like a photograph of a corpse's hand, compressed into 16 by 16 pixels. It is hyper-realistic in a world that is deliberately cartoonish. Why would the developers, working with the Game Boy's 4-shade palette, spend precious bytes on a human hand? The answer lies in the narrative that was almost told. Early design documents suggest that the Pokémon Tower was originally intended to be a much more explicit monument to the dead, the ghost of Marowak's mother, the one that blocks your path and later reveals itself as a grieving parent. That ghost was supposed to be a visible, tangible presence, but the designers wanted more. They wanted the player to feel the weight of death, not just as a story beat, but as a physical intrusion. They wanted you to see something that belonged to your world, not theirs. The hand was meant to appear in a specific room on the tower's upper floor. You would walk in, the screen would flash, and for a split second, you would see a pale hand reaching from the ground. Then it would vanish. No battle, no explanation, just a subliminal image that would haunt you. And it did haunt players. Those who knew where to look in the code, or who encountered a glitch that loaded the wrong sprite table. The hand became a legend on early internet forums, a whispered secret among those who had seen it. But the question remains, why was it created and why was it buried? The most likely answer is that Nintendo of America's localization team, or perhaps Game Freak themselves, decided that a realistic human body part was too disturbing for a children's game. The Pokémon world is built on an implicit contract. The creatures are monsters, but they are safe. They are friends. A human hand decaying breaks that contract. It reminds the player that this is a game about death, and that the dead are not always Pokémon. The hand was cut, but it was not erased. It remains in the game's code as a ghost within the software itself, a digital corpse that the developers tried to bury, but could not fully remove. There is a deeper theory, one that resonates with the melancholic tone of this series. Some fans believe the White Hand represents the player's own intrusion into the afterlife. The Pokémon Tower is a sacred place, a resting ground for the souls of Pokémon. But the player character, a child, walks through it without reverence. They catch Pokémon, they fight ghosts, they steal items from graves. The hand in this reading is not a monster. It is the reproach of the dead. It reaches up from the ground to grab the ankle of the living, to remind you that you do not belong here. The hand is the game's own conscience, a fragment of cut content that survives as a warning. You are not supposed to see this. The psychological impact of this sprite cannot be overstated. In a pixelated, stylized world where every object is friendly and round, a single hyper-realistic human hand triggers a deep-seated revulsion. It is the uncanny valley compressed into one sprite. Your brain, accustomed to the simple lines of a Pokéball or a Pikachu's ear, suddenly has to process something that looks like it came from a medical textbook. The contrast is jarring, and it is meant to be. The creators of that original beta understood that horror works best when it violates the visual language of its surroundings, and that is why the hand was buried. Not because it was scary, but because it was too real. It broke the dream. It reminded players that the cute, safe world of Pokémon was built on a foundation of erased stories and unfinished graves. The hand is a fragment of a game that almost existed, a darker, older Pokémon that might have explored war, death, and the cost of companionship. Instead, those themes were sanded down, softened, and sold to children. But the hand remains, a fossil in the code, waiting for someone to dig it up. The hand's existence also mirrors another piece of abandoned content, the Buried Alive model. That is a name you will hear again soon. For now, consider this. If the white hand is the ghost of an idea, then the Buried Alive model is its skeleton, but we will walk through those bones in the next chapter. For now, rest with the image of that pale limb, reaching out of the earth in a tower full of spirits, a reminder that some things are not meant to be found, and yet here we are, finding them. The white hand was a fragment, a single frame of decay preserved in the amber of an old cartridge. But it was not the only anomaly buried in that code. It was a warning, perhaps, of something deeper, a ripple on the surface of a much darker pond. Hidden deeper in the architecture of Pokémon Tower is a completely different piece of content, an encounter that was never meant to see the light of day, a boss, scrapped, intended specifically for the summit of the tower. This is the Buried Zombie, sometimes called the Buried Alive model. It was designed to be the final confrontation at the peak of the Pokémon Tower, the last obstacle before the silence at the top. Data miners have found its bones in the code, the triggers and conditions that were meant to summon it, but the encounter itself is incomplete. It was severed from the game in the final hours of development. What remains is a ghost of a fight that was deemed too heavy to include in the final product. But the game over screen associated with this entity was fully preserved, and it is this screen that reveals the true graphic nature of what was planned. When the player loses to the Buried Zombie, there is no white fade, no retreat to a warm bed. The player character is dragged into the earth, swallowed whole by the ground of the tower. The sprite sinks pixel by pixel into the dirt. The screen goes dark. It is a failure state that implies permanence, a burial, an absolute end to the journey. Why did Game Freak remove this? The official answer is silence. No interview, no developer commentary, no developer diary ever mentions the Buried Alive model. It was simply cut. Perhaps the content was too dark for a game about collecting monsters. A game where the ultimate punishment is being dragged into a grave in a haunted tower was a step too far. It implies consequences that the Pokémon world has always worked to avoid. Death is not a mechanic in Pokémon, but here it was, almost, buried in the code. This is the profound nature of the institutional silence. The Buried Alive model is a symbol. It represents every story the franchise decided was too heavy to tell, every truth that was sealed away. It is a monument to the darker side of Pokémon training that the League and the developers have spent decades trying to quietly forget. The idea that not every journey ends in victory. Some journeys end in the ground. The tower was meant to have a guardian, a secret at its peak, but the secret was deemed too dangerous, and so it was buried before it could ever speak. This pattern of sealing away a story, of locking a promise inside a container, is a thread that runs through the very fabric of the Pokémon universe. It extends beyond the code and into the narrative history of the franchise itself. There is a story that was fully written, explicitly designed, and then deliberately abandoned. A golden ball that was never opened, a promise that was never fulfilled. That story is the mystery of the GS ball and the unfulfilled promise, a locked box at the center of the anime's history, and it is a mystery we have to turn to next. The earth had swallowed the player whole in Lavender Tower's deepest floor. A game over screen that never made it to the final cartridge. And yet, there are other graves in the Pokémon world that are not made of code. They are made of narrative intention, buried alive inside the minds of writers who never return to finish the dig. One of those graves holds the gold and silver Pokéball. It appears without warning in the second season of the animated series. Carried by Ash Ketchum as a delivery from Professor Oak, the ball is sleek, metallic and marked with 2 letters, G and S, gold and silver. It is not a normal ball. It does not open. From the moment the GS ball is introduced, it carries an aura of wrongness. In a world where every Pokéball clicks and flashes and releases its contents in a beam of red light, this sphere is silent. It is sealed. Ash receives it early in the Yoto journey, tasked with bringing it to a man named Kurt, a master craftsman of Pokeballs who lives in Azalea Town. Kurt is the only person who might understand the ball's construction. He is also the personification of frustration. When Ash hands him the GS ball, Kurt examines it with the reverence of an archaeologist handling a relic. He polishes it, he weighs it, he listens to its silence, and then he says the words that echo across 20 years. I can't open it. Kurt is not incompetent. He is the closest thing the anime has to a Pokéball sage. He knows the materials, the mechanisms, the ancient techniques. But this ball resists every tool and every incantation. It becomes a physical metaphor for a dead end, not just in the story, but in the creative process itself. For reasons that were never explained in the show, Kurt keeps the ball. He promises to study it. Ash moves on to his next badge, and the GS ball remains on a pedestal in Kurt's workshop, gathering dust and silence. It is never mentioned again. Why was Ash given this task? Why did the writers introduce a mystery that would never be solved? The answer lies in the abandoned architecture of the Pokémon anime's original plan. A developer named Masamitsu Hidaka, who worked closely on the early seasons, later revealed in an interview that the GS ball was intended to contain a very specific creature, Celebi, the time travel Pokémon. The ball was meant to be a vessel for the forest spirit, a living paradox sealed in metal. But at the same time, the third Pokémon movie, Pokémon Forever, was being produced. That movie also featured Celebi as its central figure. The two projects collided. Someone had to give way. The movie won, and so the GS ball became a phantom. The writers simply walked away from it. They stopped writing. They stopped acknowledging its existence. The ball still sits in Kurt's workshop, an unopened box of creative potential, a gravestone for a storyline that was buried before it could breathe. For the viewers who grew up watching those episodes, the GS ball is a quiet irritation, a mystery that was promised and then withdrawn. It teaches a strange lesson about the nature of storytelling in the Pokémon world. Not every question will be answered. Some doors are locked forever, and the key was thrown away by a producer's decision. The ball itself as an object is also a symbol of the player's own frustration. In the games, you never touch the GS ball. It exists only in the anime. But for fans who crossed over between media, it represented a boundary. A point where the lore of the show and the lore of the games could not meet. It was a narrative dead end, a cul-de-sac of meaning. And like the ghost in Lavender Tower, it haunts the edges of the story. A reminder that the creators do not owe us closure. There is, however, a thread that connects back to Celebi, to time travel, to the forest shrine in Ilex Forest. That connection will be pulled in the next chapter as we examine the script that was abandoned, the movie, He That Swallowed the Mystery, and the final resting place of the GS ball's intended inhabitant. The Celebi connection and the abandoned script is where this silence finally breaks, or where we discover that some silences are meant to be eternal. The GS ball is what happens when a storyline outlives its own reason for existing. Ash Ketchum carried the golden and silver Pokéball through the Yoto region as a courier burdened with a mystery he was never meant to solve. He delivered it to Kurt, the ball maker of Azalea Town, craftsman who lived in the shadows of an old forest. working with materials that felt ancient and sacred, and there the ball stayed. For the entire journey through Yoto, this artifact sat on a workshop shelf, gathering the quiet dust of neglect. The anime had built a small world of expectations around this object. It promised a revelation, but the promise was a ghost long before the ball was ever handed over. Years later, the silence around this object was finally broken, not in the anime itself, but in a quiet interview with Masamitsu Hidaka, a director and writer who had been with the series since its very first episode. He confirmed what many fans had long suspected. The GS ball was designed with a singular purpose. It was a cage for a mythical creature, not just any mythical creature, the voice of the forest itself, Celebi. Celebi is the traveller of time, a being of green and pink that weaves through the past, the present and the future, the way wind weaves through leaves. A mythical Pokémon defined entirely by its connection to temporal flow. The narrative symmetry was exquisite. A ball that could not be opened, perhaps because the creature inside existed in a state of constant flux. A time capsule containing a time traveller. The developers understood the potential of this creature. A time-travelling Pokémon could unlock infinite narrative possibilities. The script was reportedly complete. Kurt was meant to be the key. The ball was meant to open. Ash was meant to witness a creature that existed outside the linear rules of the world he knew. But the Pokémon world is not just a narrative universe. It is a machine designed to sell tickets, toys, and trading cards. The fourth Pokémon movie was given an ultimatum. It required a headliner, a mythical creature with enough star power to justify an entire theatrical release. The executives looked at the schedule. They saw the GS ball. They saw Celebi, and they made a choice. Rather than having the mythical Pokémon debut on the small screen as the conclusion of a long television arc, the decision was made to uproot the entire storyline. Celebi would not be the prize at the end of a patient journey through Yoto. Celebi would be the star of the movie. The Celebi television arc was discarded. The script was abandoned. This is the butterfly effect. Marketing decisions on the internal logic and lore of the Pokémon world. This single change did not just affect one episode. It rewrote the destiny of an entire narrative arc. The writers had to scramble. The GS ball was now a dead object in the story. They could not open it. They could not explain it. They could only ignore it. The weight of a boardroom decision fell entirely upon the shoulders of a fictional world, forcing the characters to act as if a massive glowing mystery simply did not exist. The machine required the myth to be commodified in a specific format. The anime was left to clean up the mess. The GS ball could not be opened because its intended occupant was now off limits. The writers had nothing to put inside it. The only solution was to never speak of it again. The ball remains in Kurt's possession to this day, a silent monument to a story that was never told. Kurt, who was meant to be the keymaster, the craftsman who would unlock the temporal capsule, is instead the graveyard keeper. He tends to a relic whose purpose has been erased. Every time a fan re-watches those early Yoto episodes, they see the ball sitting there on the shelf. It is a constant reminder of a path not taken. It is the ghost of a narrative that haunts the workshop, a shadow in the corner of the frame. The anime has moved on, but the evidence remains. The GS ball is not just a mystery, it is a cemetery for creative ambition. When we ask what is inside the GS ball, we are asking a question that cannot be answered because the answer was unmade. The GS ball contains nothing. It contains an absence. And sometimes, in the world of Pokémon, an absence is the most haunting presence of all, because an empty space in the narrative is a void you can fall into. A promise that was never kept never really dies. It just wanders, waiting to be resolved. But the GS ball is not the only ball with secrets. The standard Pokéball, the device that defines the relationship between human and Pokémon, has a history just as strange, just as full of unspoken physics. If the GS ball is a broken promise suspended in time, the standard Pokéball is a working contract written in light and matter, and understanding the mechanics of that contract The unseen rules of how a creature is compressed into a sphere of red and white is our next frontier. We have to look at the cage that works every single day. We have to examine the anatomy of the Pokéball. The GS ball was never meant to remain a secret. That much we know from the developers themselves. It was supposed to open, to reveal Celebi, to fulfill the narrative arc that began when Ash Ketchum received that golden sphere from the mysterious Professor Oak. But production schedules collided, a movie took priority, and the ball was sealed permanently, not by any lock in its design, but by the inertia of an abandoned script. It became a symbol of something left unresolved. And yet, the GS ball is not the only container in this world that refuses to explain itself. Every single Pokéball is a sealed mystery, and unlike the GS ball, which can be dismissed as a narrative dead end, the standard Pokéball is used billions of times a day across every region. It is the most common piece of technology in the Pokémon world, and we have no idea how it actually works. That statement might seem exaggerated. After all, we have seen Pokéballs function from the very first episode. A trainer throws a capsule, a beam of red light strikes a creature, and the creature is pulled inside. The ball may shake once, twice, 3 times, and then a mechanism clicks, signaling a successful capture. The creature is now inside, stored as energy or data, or something in between. But if you press for details, if you ask what that energy state feels like, or whether the interior is a physical space or a simulated environment, the official documentation offers nothing. The Pokédex entries never describe the experience. The anime never shows a clear interior beyond a swirling red void. The games depict the inside as a simple screen of red light with no geometry, no walls, no floor, no habitat, and the Pokéball's own creators, Silph Co., guard the schematics behind corporate secrecy and patent law. The Pokémon League, which endorses and regulates all trainer equipment, has never released a public explanation of the biological and physical processes involved. What we are left with is a technology that every child in the Pokémon world uses, but that no adult seems willing to discuss in detail. Consider the moment of capture. A wild Pokémon, fully material, made of flesh and bone and elemental energy, is struck by a beam of red light. In that instant, the creature is converted into something that can be stored in a sphere roughly 6 centimeters in diameter. The conversion is instantaneous, or at least it appears that way. But what exactly happens to the body? Is it broken down at the molecular level and reconstructed inside? Is it transformed into pure energy, as some suggest, and held in a containment field? Or is it a form of data compression, where the Pokémon's entire biological blueprint is encoded and stored as information, ready to be decompressed upon release? These are not questions the games ever answer. The anime occasionally shows a translucent interior, a warm glow, a sense of comfort, but that may be a representation rather than reality. In fact, the only time we get a hint of what lies inside is when a ball is opened on screen and the Pokémon emerges from a flash of light. That light is a wall. It reveals nothing. The lack of official documentation extends to the interior environment itself. Is the inside of a Pokéball a habitat? Does it contain air, temperature control, space to move? If we accept the mechanics of the games, a Pokémon can remain inside indefinitely without food, water, or air. That suggests either a stasis field, where time is frozen for the occupant, or a simulated environment that provides all necessities. But if it can provide all necessities, why does it appear as a void? In the games, when you access your Pokémon storage system, the party screen shows each creature inside its ball as a static icon. There is no indication of an internal world. In the anime, a Pokémon inside a ball is usually shown as a tiny silhouette within a circular frame, again suggesting a limited space. Yet when a Pokémon is released, it appears to have been conscious and aware of its surroundings. Pikachu often seems irritated after being recalled, suggesting he experienced something unpleasant. But what? Is the interior boring, lonely, painful, or is it simply a moment of transition that feels like falling asleep? The ethical implications of this compression are staggering. If a Pokémon is registered data, does it retain consciousness? If it experiences time inside that compressed state, then a capture could be a form of sensory deprivation or confinement. The Pokéball becomes a prison cell that fits in your pocket, and yet the Pokémon League has never been compelled to regulate the technology beyond basic safety standards. They have never required transparency about the internal mechanisms. They have never funded a public study on the psychological effects of prolonged storage. In fact, the League has actively discouraged such research. In the games, there is no department of Pokémon welfare that investigates the ethics of capture. There is no professor whose specialization is Pokéball technology ethics. The closest we get is the occasional remark from a character like Professor Elm, who studies Pokémon breeding and eggs. But even he never questions the morality of the ball itself. The silence is so uniform that it begins to feel intentional. The League controls the narrative. The League decides which mysteries remain unexplored. And then there is the phenomenon of the failed capture. We have all seen it. A wild Pokémon breaks free from a ball just before the mechanism clicks. In the games, this is represented by the ball shaking and then bursting open. The Pokémon escapes seemingly unharmed. But if we consider the conversion process, a failed capture is far more violent than it appears. The Pokémon's body was partially transformed. Its molecules were already being rearranged into the storage state. And then the process was interrupted. What happens to a creature in that moment? Is it physically shattered and then forced to reform itself in real time? The games never show a consequence. The Pokémon appears perfectly fine after breaking free, but the anime sometimes depicts a faint glow or a disoriented expression. In the manga, there is a sequence where a Pokémon is only partially captured, its body flickering between material and energy forms. That moment, the moment of a failed capture, is the most direct evidence we have that the conversion process is not gentle. It is an invasive procedure, and if the machine fails mid-operation, the creature is left to piece itself back together without assistance. We are not meant to think about this. The Pokéball is presented as a convenience, a tool, a badge of mastery. But underneath that red and white shell is a technology that defies all known physics and biology. It is magic disguised as science, and the people who could explain it choose not to. The GS Ball was a single object that held one secret, but every Pokéball holds a secret every time it is used, and we are expected to simply trust that the creature inside is okay. That trust is fragile, and it leads directly to another mystery, one that involves a creature whose body itself is a sealed container, a skull that might be a shell, an identity hidden behind bone. The question of what lies inside a Cubone's armor is the same question we are asking about the Pokéball. Only the vessel is not made of metal and circuits, but of something far older, far more tragic, and that story has no button to open it. The previous chapter asked whether the Pokéball is a habitat or a void. And that question lingers now as we turn to a creature whose very existence seems to depend on a void that should not exist. Cubone appears in the first generation of games as a small, lonely Pokémon, perpetually wearing a helmet that is not a helmet but a skull. The Pokédex entry for Cubo is one of the most quoted, most disturbing lines in all of Pokémon lore. It states plainly that this Pokémon wears the skull of its deceased mother. The image is immediate and tragic, a child forced to carry the remains of its parent as armor, as a mask, as a constant reminder of loss. Every Cubone you encounter in the tall grass, every Cubone hatched from an egg, every Cubone that appears in the anime, they all supposedly share this same origin. But think about that for a moment. If Cubone wears its mother's skull, then every Cubone that exists must have had a mother who died, and that mother's skull must be the right size and shape to fit onto the baby's head. That means the mother must have been a Marowak, because Cubone evolves into Marowak. So the mother is a Marowak, and when she dies, her skull is somehow detached and worn by her offspring. But then, what happens to the rest of the mother's body? And if every Cubone is born from a mother who dies, then how does the species sustain itself? Every new generation requires the death of the previous one, and the skull must be passed down. But what about Cubone that are hatched from eggs in the player's care? Those Cubone come from a mother that is still alive, because you can breed Marowak and get Cubone. The Pokédex entry directly contradicts the mechanics of breeding. The games never clarify the source of the bone. They leave the creature's tragic backstory open to dark interpretation, and that ambiguity has allowed a more unsettling theory to emerge. Consider the possibility that the skull is not a mother's skull at all. The theory proposes that the helmet is a natural growth, a part of Cubone's own body that hardens into a bone-like shell over its head. The skull shape is a coincidence, and the story about the mother is a piece of folklore told by trainers to explain the inexplicable. After all, Cubone is also described as having a steel-hard shell that shields its entire body. What lurks inside that shell is a total mystery, according to the same Pokédex. So the skull may be nothing more than an external cranial plate, and the sad story is a comforting narrative to mask a weirder reality. Perhaps Cubone is not mourning at all. Perhaps it is merely growing. But then why does it weep? In the games, Cubone cries when it is attacked, and its tears are said to be a sign of sadness. Yet if the skull is natural, then the tears could be something else entirely. A biological reaction, a warning signal, or even a lure. The silence of the developers on this point is deafening. They could have clarified in later generations, but they chose not to. In Pokémon Sun and Moon, the Alolan Cubone's entry mentions that it wears the skull of its mother, but also that the skull is sturdy and never comes off. The wording is careful, as if to avoid confirming whether the skull is truly a separate object. The mystery deepens when you realize that in Pokémon Tower, you encounter a ghost that is revealed to be the spirit of a Marowak, its child Cubone waiting beside it. That ghost is the mother, and its skull is absent. So the story holds in that specific instance. But that is just one ghost, one Cubone. The rest remain ambiguous. Now consider the biological impossibility of it being a universal trait. If every Cubone in the wild wears its mother's skull, then the mother must die immediately after birth, or shortly before, and the skull must be available to the newborn. But Marowak are not known to die upon giving birth. They live, they battle, they evolve. The skull of a Marowak is large, larger than Cubone's head in many depictions. How does a newborn Cubone carry a skull that is too big? In the anime, Cubone's skull fits perfectly, as if it grew with the Pokémon. That suggests the skull is part of the body. The games themselves show Cubone's sprite, with a skull that matches its head size exactly. If it were the mother's skull, it would be oversized or undersized, depending on the age of the Cubone. The only way this works is if the skull shrinks or the Cubone grows into it, but neither is explained. The lore is a patchwork of tragedy and silence, and the silence is the most important part. Perhaps the truth is that we are not meant to know. The Cubone Paradox is a deliberate gap in the world's knowledge. It is a story left incomplete so that it can haunt us. The mother's skull, if it exists, is a symbol of love and loss. If it does not, then the weeping Cubone is crying for no reason, and the world is colder than we thought. Either way, the answer remains hidden beneath the armor, and what lurks beneath that armor is a question that leads us deeper into the unknown. We will explore that next, in a chapter that asks what truly dwells inside the shell and why the Pokémon world chooses to keep its secrets sealed. That is the story of what lurks beneath the armor. The previous chapter lingered on the impossibility of Cubone's origin, the mother's skull worn by every child, a paradox of biology that seems to defy the very cycle of life and death. But perhaps the most unsettling detail is not the contradiction itself, but what the Pokédex chooses to admit. It states openly that the creature's interior is a total mystery. After decades of research, the steel-hard shell remains an absolute barrier. We have catalogued the creature's moveset, its habitat, its evolutionary triggers, its dietary needs, but we have never seen its true face. And after all this time, we have to ask ourselves whether this is simply a failure of science, or a deliberate silence. This is not a unique case to the Cubone line. The Pokémon world is filled with these steel-hard shells, these masks, these faces that are never fully shown to the player. Shellder clamps its shell shut to reveal only a tongue and a single eye. But the soft body inside is never fully articulated in the official art. Fortress is described as a hollow shell that fires projectiles, but that creature piloting the turret is never observed. It is a weapon with a ghost inside. Duskull wears its mask like a skull, but the mask never comes off. The recurring theme here is the void inside. The creature's true face is an absence, a deliberate blind spot in the world building. This lack of visual confirmation creates a deep, specific sense of unease. When we cannot see the eyes of a creature, it becomes difficult to gauge its humanity, its consciousness. The armor depersonalizes the Pokémon. It turns it into a walking object, a living husk, and this depersonalization edges into something darker. The joy of a Pokémon is usually expressed by its face, the sparkle in Pikachu's eyes, the smile of a Jigglypuff. But what about the creatures that have no face we can read? We do not know if a Cubone is happy to see us, or if it is crying in agony. We are constantly kept at a distance. The shell is a boundary, and we are never allowed to cross it. The player is the one being denied access, bonding with a creature that refuses to show itself. The silence on this matter is institutional. The research community has actively chosen not to look. Professor Oak, Professor Elm, the various specialists across the regions, they have access to technology that can teleport matter across vast distances, that can clone ancient life from fossilized amber. They have the ability to render the invisible visible. They have X-ray technology. They have scanners capable of mapping the deepest ocean trenches, but they refuse to look inside the shell. There is no Pokédex entry that specifies the results of an autopsy on a Cubone. It is an unspoken rule, a taboo. When the Pokédex says what lurks inside is a mystery, it is not a statement of current ignorance. It is a declaration of intent. They are choosing to keep it a mystery. Because what would it mean if they looked inside and found nothing? What if the shell is all there is? What if the creature is just the armor, a shell built on top of a void? The biology of a Pokémon is often presented as magical, but this is different. This is a refusal to know, and that refusal is a wall the player can never climb. The armor of a Pokémon, then, is a perfect metaphor for the code that defines it, a textured surface hiding a deep digital void. We assume that under the armor there is flesh, blood, a heart, but the game has never proven this. It simply asks us to believe. And what happens when the code itself begins to fracture? What happens when the texture of the shell fails to load? The glitch, the error, the corruption, it reveals what is underneath. It peels back the armor, and what it finds there is not a heart. It is a scrambled collection of data, a ghost in the machine, a being that exists beyond the boundaries of the intended design, a living error with no shell to hide behind. Its interior is permanently exposed to the player, a raw wound of code that should never have been seen. This is what we will look at next, the code without the armor, the entity that the Pokémon world could not contain, the corruption that walks like a Pokémon, but dreams like a fragment of forgotten source code. We have spent the last chapter staring into the void that lies beneath the armor of Cubone, wondering what face hides inside that unbreakable shell. But the void is not unique to creatures of bone and flesh. There is another void, one that exists not in the biology of a Pokémon, but in the very fabric of the digital world itself. And tonight, we turn our gaze to that fragment of nothingness, a ghost that was never meant to be born, yet haunts the oldest region of Kanto. Its name is MissingNo, and its existence is a crack in the foundation of reality. As the first generation of Pokémon games were released in the late 1990s, they were built on a delicate scaffold of code. Memory was scarce, data was packed tightly, and every byte had to earn its place. In such an environment, errors were not just possible, they were inevitable. The developers at Game Freak did their best to seal every seam, but they could not foresee every edge case, every unintended path a player might walk. and somewhere in the depths of that code, a fragment of corrupted data was left behind, a loose thread waiting to be pulled. This is the story of how a glitch became a legend, and a legend became a silent horror. The discovery of the so-called glitch Pokémon did not come from a single dramatic hunt. It emerged slowly, through word of mouth and playground whispers. A child would encounter a strange shape on the screen, a jumble of pixels, sometimes a massive block, sometimes an inverted pattern, and the game would freeze or warp in ways that seemed impossible. The creature had no name in the traditional sense, only a placeholder, MissingNo, short for missing number. It was not a designed monster, not a creature of the wild. It was a fragment of non-existent data, a piece of code that referenced a Pokémon that was never meant to exist. That fragment, when summoned through specific exploits, like talking to an old man in Viridian City and then flying to Cinnabar Island, would appear as an encounter. And it was in that moment that the digital world revealed its fragility. Think of it as a haunting. MissingNo does not appear by accident. It only manifests when the player deliberately pushes against the boundaries of the game's logic. You have to break the intended flow, to step outside the carefully curated path, and then, only then, does the ghost appear. It is a consequence of trespassing into the forbidden zones of the cartridge, where data is not meant to be read. In that sense, MissingNo functions as a digital haunting, appearing only when you exploit the edges of the world, like a spirit that rises when you disturb its grave. And the encounter itself is not harmless. The physical consequences are immediate and irreversible. When MissingNo appears, it does not just fight you, it reaches into the memory of your save file and begins to corrupt. The most famous effect is on your inventory. The 6th item slot multiplies wildly, cloning whatever was in that position, often rare candies or master balls. At first glance, this might seem like a gift, but the corruption goes deeper. The game's Hall of Fame data becomes hopelessly scrambled. The Pokémon data in your boxes can become unreadable, and entire sections of the cartridge memory can be overwritten with meaningless noise. Your progress is no longer your own. It becomes a palimpsest of the glitch. The player is left with a gallery of distorted sprites, impossible Pokémon names, and a save file that may never function normally again. The ghost does not destroy you, it distorts you, and this raises a question that has haunted the community for decades. Is MissingNo a sentient being trapped in the digital void, or merely a mirror reflecting the game's fragility? There is no easy answer. On one hand, it is simply an error, a piece of data that was never assigned a sprite or a name, a null pointer that the game tries to render and fails. But on the other hand, the way it behaves, the way it corrupts with seeming purpose, the way it reacts to the player's actions, it almost feels alive. Some have argued that MissingNo is the ghost of a developer's mistake, a memory of something that was deleted but not erased. Others see it as a warning. The game is fragile, and we are not meant to look behind the curtain. The Pokémon Company has never officially acknowledged MissingNo as anything but a bug. No in-game lore, no apology, no explanation. The silence is itself a form of haunting. The mystery remains, not because it cannot be solved. It is, after all, just code, but because the developers chose to let it remain unsolved. They patched the glitch in later versions, but they never gave it a story, a meaning, a burial. MissingNo was left to wander the dark corners of the internet, a fragment of a world that no longer exists, and yet its legacy is undeniable. It is the original glitch Pokémon, the first ghost of the code, a reminder that every carefully constructed world has its seams, and in those seams something waits. That something, the corruption of data, the distortion of reality, is not confined to a single cartridge. It reaches across generations, across regions. The next time you boot up a Pokémon game, ask yourself, what else is hiding in the spaces between the numbers? What other ghosts are waiting for someone to step off the path? The answer will lead us to a place where the very fabric of Kanto begins to unravel. A phenomenon known only as the corruption of Kanto's reality, Before we dive deeper into this incredible journey, I'm curious, where in the world are you watching this from? Drop a comment below and let our global community know. And if you're finding this as mind-blowing as I am, hit that like button to help more people discover this story. MissingNo is more than a glitch. It is a tear in the fabric of Kanto itself. When you encounter it on the coast of Cinnabar Island, you are not just finding a random error in the code. You are witnessing the point where the illusion of a stable world begins to dissolve. The very act of surfing along the eastern shore, encountering a Pokémon that does not exist, reveals something deeply unsettling about the reality we have been navigating. This is not a simple programming mistake. It is a symptom of a deeper corruption, evidence that the world of Pokémon is either a simulation with decaying boundaries or a reality that was never fully assembled. The presence of glitches like MissingNo suggests that Kanto is not a solid, self-contained universe. It is a construct, a digital landscape built on layers of data that were never meant to be seen. When the game encounters a Pokémon species with an identifier that does not correspond to any defined creature, it does not simply crash. It pulls from the nearest available memory, often the player's own name or Hall of Fame data, and assembles a monstrous chimera of letters and pixels. This is the behavior of a system that is struggling to maintain coherence, a reality that is fraying at the edges. Every time you trigger MissingNo, you are forcing the game to reveal its own scaffolding. You are looking behind the curtain, and what you see is not a world but a patchwork of code, vulnerable and incomplete. And yet, the most haunting aspect of this phenomenon is its location. Why Cinnabar Island? Why the coast of a town that was destroyed by a volcanic eruption? In the lore of Pokémon, Cinnabar Island is a place of burial and loss. The volcano that once gave life to the island later consumed it, and the town was abandoned. The gym leader Blaine, a man who once dedicated himself to the fire type, retreated into seclusion. The island itself became a ghost, but in the code, the coastline around Cinnabar holds a special property. The water tiles there are adjacent to the island's internal map data in a way that allows the player to step outside the intended boundaries. This is not random. The developers designed the island with a specific memory layout, and the glitch manifests precisely where the world's architecture is thinnest. It is as if the volcanic destruction did not just erase a town, it weakened the very structure of that reality, leaving a wound through which the digital ghosts can seep. The theory that glitches are the souls of Pokémon that were deleted during the development process adds a layer of tragedy to this corruption. In the early days of Pokémon Red and Green, the developers at Game Freak created many more species than the final 151. Some of these creatures were cut due to memory constraints, others because they were deemed too strange or incomplete. Their data was not erased. It was simply abandoned, left in the code as dormant fragments. When MissingNo appears, it is not a random collection of bytes. It is a shape that was once alive, a creature that never got to breathe. The distorted pixels and the garbled cries are the echoes of those forgotten designs, crying out from the digital grave. They are the spirits of the deleted, forever trapped between existence and non-existence. And yet, Nintendo has never addressed the canonicity of these anomalies. They have patched certain glitches in later releases, but they have never spoken about what MissingNo. The silence is deliberate. It is a refusal to acknowledge the ghosts in the machine, perhaps because to do so would be to admit that the world they built is not as solid as we believe. The official games continue to treat MissingNo as a non-entity, a product of player error, but the players know better. They have seen the glitch. They have felt the corruption spread through their inventory, duplicating items and corrupting Hall of Fame data. They have witnessed the world bend and break. The Cinnabar Island connection is not just a technical curiosity, it is a narrative clue. The town that was destroyed by fire is the same town where the glitch is most easily accessed. Fire, in the mythology of Pokémon, is a force of destruction and rebirth. The volcano that destroyed Cinnabar was not just a natural disaster, it was a purging. But what was purged? Perhaps the deleted Pokémon were once stored there, in the island's hidden labs, and when the volcano erupted, it scattered their data into the water. The Cinnabar Lab, as it is called in the game, is a place of science and creation. It is where Mewtwo was born, a creature made from the DNA of Mew, a being that should not exist. The lab is a site of unnatural creation, and the glitch on its coast is the consequence of that tampering. The corruption of Kanto's reality began not with MissingNo, but with the hubris of those who tried to play God. As you sleep tonight, the code of Kanto continues to run in the memory of old cartridges. The glitch is always there, waiting to be summoned. It is a reminder that the world we love is fragile, a thin veneer over a void of abandoned data. The next time you surf along the coast of Cinnabar, consider what lies beneath the waves. Not water, but the remnants of 1,000 forgotten souls, pressing against the boundaries of a reality that cannot hold them. In the next chapter, we will descend into those very laboratories, the Cinnabar Island Lab reports, and uncover what was truly created and destroyed within those walls. The Cinnabar Island coast is a scar on the Kanto region. The volcano that once defined the island's geography now defines its memory. But the eruption that reshaped the land did not reach the old mansion. It stands, half collapsed at the island's southern edge, charred wood and concrete, windows like hollow eyes, and inside, a collection of journals that tell the most terrifying story the Pokémon world has ever tried to forget. We know them as the lab reports of the Cinnabar Island Pokémon Mansion, but the word reports feels too mundane for what sits in those pages. These are confessions. They are the documented aftermath of a project that began with a single question: what if we could create a Pokémon from scratch? The journals are not written for the public. They were never meant to be found. Their tone is clinical, almost sterile. The scientists document temperature, pressure, genetic markers, survival rates. They speak of the subject as it, never he or she. But beneath the cold language, there is a creeping dread. The experiment was succeeding, and that is what made it so horrifying. The first entries describe the discovery of Mew in the jungles of Guyana, a creature believed extinct, or perhaps never truly known at all. Mew is small, pink, playful. It is the ancestor of all Pokémon, and it is the key. The logs record the extraction of genetic material with the same detachment a biologist might use to describe a blood sample from a common Rattata, but they know what they have. They call it the most significant find in the history of Pokémon research. Then the tone shifts. The pages become shorter. There is a rush. The scientists have begun the cloning process early. They are impatient. They are driven. And the journal entries begin to refer to something called the birthing process. The words are sanitized, but the implication is visceral. They did not simply grow a clone in a tube. They created a creature through a method that required a living host. The logs never name the host. They only note the subject is agitated, and then suddenly there is a new life. Mewtwo, born of Mew's DNA, but born in a way that violates every natural boundary. The pages that follow are fragmented. Some are missing entirely, torn out perhaps, or burned in the same fire that scorched the mansion. But what remains tells of a failure the scientists did not anticipate. The clone was not stable, it was not controllable, and it was not alone. The logs speak of multiple attempts. There are references to Subject 2, Subject 3, and then the entries become cryptic. The handwriting changes. Something happened in that lab that the authors could not bring themselves to describe fully. They write of containment breaches, they write of screams, and then the reports stop. What happened between the discovery of Mew in Guyana and the destruction of the lab is missing. The pages are gone, but the gaps themselves speak louder than words ever could. The scientists were not simply trying to copy a legendary Pokémon, they were trying to surpass it. They were trying to forge a weapon, and in the process, they created something that should not exist. The burnt-out mansion on Cinnabar Island is a monument to that arrogance. The The journals are the confession, and the missing pages are the silence that follows a catastrophe no one survived to describe. The cold clinical tone of the reports is a mask. It hides the terror of a project that went beyond cloning into something far more radical. The scientists were not just manipulating genetics, they were rewriting the definition of life itself. They wanted to control the very essence of Pokémon existence, and in doing so, they opened a door that cannot be closed. When the mansion finally burned, the world looked away. The records were sealed. The story was buried, but the evidence remains. The missing pages are not lost, they are hidden, and what they contain may be the key to understanding not just Mewtwo, but something far older, something that connects every failed experiment to a single common thread. That thread leads to a creature that appears everywhere and nowhere, a creature that can only mimic, never truly become. Its weight matches Mew's. Its ability to transform is unsettlingly similar, and its existence may be the most tragic outcome of those experiments on Cinnabar Island. We will pick up that thread soon, but for now, let the silence of that burnt-out mansion settle. The journals are there, the cold words remain, and the missing pages wait for someone who dares to look into the void between what was written and what was erased. We are asked to write the full spoken script for a YouTube video. The video is Weirdest Unsolved Mysteries of the Pokémon World. Lore for Sleep, and we are writing Chapter 13, the Cinnabar Island Lab Reports. The project context includes a detailed research brief with various unsolved mysteries. The focus of this chapter is the Cinnabar Island Lab Reports, specifically re-examining the journals found in the burnt-out mansion on Cinnabar Island. The cold clinical tone about Mewtwo's birth and cloning failure, missing pages, and implications of radical experiments. We have an established voice from previous chapters, but we are to match the tone. The opening directive says, start with a concrete fact, question, or bold declaration about this chapter's focus. Never begin with filler commands like imagine, picture this, close your eyes, or think about. The narrative bridge from the previous chapter discussed how glitches, like MissingNo, suggest a crumbling reality and the Cinnabar Island connection. Why the glitch appears on the coast of a town destroyed by a volcano. So our opening must bridge from that naturally. Mandatory beats to fold in exactly once each. Re-examining the journals found in the burnt-out mansion on Cinnabar Island. The cold clinical tone used to describe the birth of Mewtwo and the failure of the cloning process. The missing pages. What happened between the discovery of Mew in Guyana and the destruction of the lab? The implication that the scientists were performing experiments far more radical than simple cloning. We also need to end by setting up the next chapter, the Ditto-Mew Connection, without explicitly announcing it. In the final paragraph, explicitly reference that title once and create irresistible curiosity. We need to write approximately 10,000 characters of continuous voiceover. The tone should be conversational, authoritative, intimate, slow burn, deep dive. No signposting, high momentum, show don't tell. Output only spoken words, no scene directions, no numbers as digits. Let's start by crafting the opening. The previous chapter ended with the glitch, MissingNo, and the connection to Cinnabar Island. We can pick up from there. The corruption of reality, leading to the unsolved mysteries on Cinnabar Island, specifically the lab reports. We'll re-examine the journals found in the burnt-out mansion on Cinnabar Island. The journals are in the Pokémon Mansion, which is a burnt-out building on Cinnabar Island. They detail the research on Mew and the creation of Mewtwo. The tone is clinical and cold, describing the birth of Mewtwo and the failure of the cloning process. There are missing pages, suggesting something happened between the discovery of Mew in Guyana and the destruction of the lab. The experiments were more radical than simple cloning. We'll expand on these beats with atmospheric details and lore. We'll also connect to the broader theme of institutional silence and unsolved mysteries. We need to be careful not to just list the beats, but weave them into a coherent narrative. The script should be engaging for sleep, so it should be descriptive and flow naturally. Let's write the script. The Cinnabar Island coast is a scar on the Kanto region. The volcano that once defined the island's geography now defines its memory. But the eruption that reshaped the land did not reach the old mansion. It stands, half collapsed, at the island's southern edge, charred wood and concrete, windows like hollow eyes, and inside, a collection of journals that tell the most terrifying story the Pokémon world has ever tried to forget. We know them as the lab reports of the Cinnabar Island Pokémon Mansion, but the word reports feels too mundane for what sits in those pages. These are confessions. They are the documented aftermath of a project that began with a single question: what if we could create a Pokémon from scratch? The journals are not written for the public. They were never meant to be found. Their tone is clinical, almost sterile. The scientists document temperature, pressure, genetic markers, survival rates. They speak of the subject as it, never he or she. But beneath the cold language, there is a creeping dread. The experiment was succeeding, and that is what made it so horrifying. The first entries describe the discovery of Mew in the jungles of Guyana, a creature believed extinct, or perhaps never truly known at all. Mew is small, pink, playful. It is the ancestor of all Pokémon, and it is the key. The logs record the extraction of genetic material with the same detachment a biologist might use to describe a blood sample from a common Rattata. But they know what they have. They call it the most significant find in the history of Pokémon research. Then the tone shifts. The pages become shorter. There is a rush. The scientists have begun the cloning process early. They are impatient. They are driven. And the journal entries begin to refer to something called the birthing process. The words are sanitized, but the implication is visceral. They did not simply grow a clone in a tube. They created a creature through a method that required a living host. The logs never name the host. They only note the subject is agitated, and then suddenly there is a new life, Mewtwo, born of Mew's DNA, but born in a way that violates every natural boundary. The pages that follow are fragmented. Some are missing entirely, torn out perhaps, or burned in the same fire that scorched the mansion. But what remains tells of a failure the scientists did not anticipate. The clone was not stable, it was not controllable, and it was not alone. The logs speak of multiple attempts. There are references to Subject 2, Subject 3, and then the entries become cryptic. The handwriting changes. Something happened in that lab that the authors could not bring themselves to describe fully. They write of containment breaches. They write of screams. And then the reports stop. What happened between the discovery of Mew in Guyana and the destruction of the lab is missing. The pages are gone, but the gaps themselves speak louder than words ever could. The scientists were not simply trying to copy a legendary Pokémon. They were trying to surpass it. They were trying to forge a weapon. And in the process, they created something that should not exist. The burnt-out mansion on Cinnabar Island is a monument to that arrogance. The journals are the confession, and the missing pages are the silence that follows a catastrophe no one survived to describe. The cold, clinical tone of the reports is a mask. It hides the terror of a project that went beyond cloning into something far more radical. The scientists were not just manipulating genetics, they were rewriting the definition of life itself. They wanted to control the very essence of Pokémon existence, and in doing so, they opened a door that cannot be closed. When the mansion finally burned, the world looked away. The records were sealed. The story was buried, but the evidence remains. The missing pages are not lost, they are hidden. And what they contain may be the key to understanding not just Mewtwo, but something far older. Something that connects every failed experiment to a single common thread. That thread leads to a creature that appears everywhere and nowhere. A creature that can only mimic, never truly become. Its weight matches Mew's. Its ability to transform is unsettlingly similar, and its existence may be the most tragic outcome of those experiments on Cinnabar Island. We will pick up that thread soon, but for now, let the silence of that burnt-out mansion settle. The journals are there, the cold words remain, and the missing pages wait for someone who dares to look into the void. Between what was written and what was erased, the Cinnabar Island lab reports describe a sterile, desperate pursuit of perfection. They outline the splicing of Mew's DNA, the fetal growth of Mewtwo in a tank, and the clinical failure of numerous attempts. But the journals never discuss what happened to the debris of that project. They never list the casualties. They document only the success. The silence around the failures is a void, and if you look closely at the Pokémon world, that void has a shape. It has a face, or rather it has no face at all. This brings us to one of the most persistent and unsettling theories in the lore, a connection that's haunted the fandom for decades. Whispered about in forums and quietly ignored by official sources, the connection between the first Pokémon, Mew, and the common transformer, Ditto. The evidence for this link is not hidden in obscure game code or scrapped storyboards. It is right there in the raw data, in the biology of both creatures, screaming to be acknowledged. Let us start with the numbers. Mew weighs exactly 4 kilograms. Ditto weighs exactly 4 kilograms. In a world where Charizard weighs over 90 kilograms and Magikarp weighs 10 kilograms, this exact match is statistically bizarre. Two creatures, one mythical and one incredibly common, sharing the exact same mass. Look at their color palettes. The soft pinkish flesh of Mew is almost identical to the translucent pink membrane of Ditto. The shade is not unique in the Pokémon world, but the tones match perfectly. Then there is the ability. The move Transform is the anchor of the entire theory. In the original games, only 2 Pokémon could learn Transform naturally and legitimately. Mew and Ditto. Mew, the genetic ancestor, can transform because it possesses the DNA of every Pokémon that has ever existed. It is the blueprint. Ditto transforms because it has no stable form of its own. It is a biological photocopier. It mimics because its own identity was erased. The theory suggests that Ditto is the failed clone. The experiments that led to Mewtwo did not succeed on the first try. There were thousands of failures. Ferals, anomalies, dead ends. But some of those failures did not die. They simply could not hold a cohesive shape. Their genetic structure was so unstable, so artificially cobbled together, that the only way they could survive was to mirror the cellular structure of whatever they touched. These cast-offs were discarded, released into the wild, or they escaped the confines of the Cinnabar lab. Over time, they bred. But because their core genome was broken, they could only reproduce by contributing nothing, by using the perfect genetic material of another Pokémon to create offspring. This is why Ditto cannot breed with itself. It is a genetic dead end, a conduit, a living vessel with no contents of its own. The tragedy deepens when you realize what this means. For every Ditto you have ever captured, every single one is a ghost of the Mewtwo project, a wandering fragment of an experiment designed to create a god, which instead created a mimic. It was never meant to exist as a species. It has no evolutionary path. It cannot evolve. It is frozen in a state of perpetual imitation. When a Ditto transforms, it is not copying a strategy for battle. It is desperately grasping for an identity. It is a creature that was never granted permission to be itself, because itself was deemed a failure, and the Pokémon League has never, not once, officially confirmed this link. Despite the overwhelming circumstantial evidence, the Pokédex entries remain deliberately vague. They say Ditto was discovered in a Chinese laboratory. They say it can rearrange its cellular structure. They never mention Mew. They never mention Cinnabar Island. This silence is intentional. To admit that Ditto is a failed clone of Mew is to admit that thousands of living, breathing, suffering creatures were created and abandoned by the very institutions that now catalogue them. It opens a door to a massive ethical scandal, a biological catastrophe hidden in plain sight. It is far easier to let Ditto remain a mystery, a charming pink blob for breeders to use, than to confront the horror of its origin. Its entire existence is a performance born from trauma. It mimics because it was never allowed to have its own song. And when a creature relies entirely on imitation, when it pours its entire soul into copying something else, it can forget the line between itself and its target. It can become obsessed with the form it wears. It can lose itself so completely that the mimicry becomes a cage. The story of Ditto is the first chapter in that tragedy. The next chapter belongs to a creature who did not stop at copying appearances. It copied a life, a longing, and a doom. That story is chapter 15, the tragedy of the mimic. The weight of a Mew is exactly 4 kilograms. The weight of a Ditto is exactly 4 kilograms. In the previous chapter, we laid out the cold evidence, the forensic data that links the earliest Pokémon with the common transformer. The identical weight implies a shared density, a common cellular structure that the official law has never addressed. But tonight, I want to step away from the evidence and ask a different question entirely. The question is not what connects Mew and Ditto. The question is why that connection feels like a tragedy. Consider the creature called Ditto. In the wild, it is silent. It drifts through the grassy roots near the Cinnabar Island coastline, a place where the earth itself is scarred by volcanic eruption and the sea air carries the ghosts of a burnt-out laboratory. It drifts through the power plant in Kanto, where man-made energy crackles through the walls. The Pokédex entries across the generations do not describe its personality. They describe its function. It can perfectly copy the cellular structure of any opponent. But what is it when it is not copying? This is the existential horror of Ditto. It is a creature that can only truly be itself by becoming something else. Its default state is a formless, amorphous purple mass. That is not a face. That is a blank slate. It has no unique battle cry, no unique animation for its signature move, because its signature move is the annihilation of its own appearance. Every time a Ditto enters a battle, it sheds its identity. It becomes a mirror, and a mirror has no soul of its own. It simply reflects. If the Mew theory is true, and the evidence is compelling, then Ditto is not just a biological anomaly, it is a failed clone. It represents a biological experiment that went wrong at the most fundamental level. The creation of Mewtwo was a success because Mewtwo gained a powerful, raging, unique consciousness. It hated its creators. It had a will. But what if the process of cloning Mew created a creature that had no will at all? What if the scientists at the Cinnabar mansion, in their attempts to replicate the progenitor of all Pokémon, accidentally stripped a soul of its unique identity? They created a shell, a perfect biological mimic, a creature that could absorb the form and even the memories of its opponents, but had nothing of its own to remember. You have to think about the silence of the Ditto. It makes no sound in the wild that the games record. It does not cry. It does not roar. It does not sing. It just sits there, waiting, and it is always found near places where humans have interfered with the fundamental laws of nature. The Cinnabar mansion, the power plant. These are wounds in the world, and Ditto gathers there like a bruise. It is a creature that exists solely because of human intervention, a broken experiment that was released into the wild to fend for itself, unable to truly live, unable to truly die, just persisting. Now, consider how this changes the perspective on one of the game's most useful tools. In the mechanics of the game, Ditto is a linchpin. It is the key to the breeding system, allowing trainers to produce eggs with specific natures, specific Vs, specific egg moves. It is a workhorse. In battle, it is a wild card, a transformer that uses the opponent's strength against them. You never think twice about it. You catch a Ditto, you box it, you forget it. But if the failed clone theory holds, every time you use that Ditto to breed a champion Pokémon, you are forcing it to abandon what little stability it has. Every time you throw it into battle and it performs a transform, you are watching a creature that has no choice but to erase itself. The player character becomes complicit in the tragedy. You are not training a Ditto. You are exploiting a broken spirit. You are asking the question the scientists on Cinnabar Island asked. What can this shell do for us? The game never lets you see Ditto's true form, because there is no true form. The purple gelatinous blob is the absence of a true form. It is the void that remained after the cloning process miscarried. It is a constant reminder of the price of scientific ambition, a creature that can only mimic, never originate, a creature whose entire existence is an echo of something else. This theme of the incomplete, of the spirit that is bound to a place and cannot move on, it runs deeper than just Ditto. It extends into the very geography of Kanto, into a tower built to hold the souls of the dead. In the Pokémon Tower of Lavender Town, there is a story that unfolds not through dialogue, but through silent encounters. A spirit that cannot be fought, cannot be caught, and cannot be reasoned with. It waits, it watches, and its story is one of the most haunting, untold narratives in the entire franchise. We will explore that story and the spirit that refuses to leave its grave in the next chapter, the uncatchable spirit of the tower. And so we leave Ditto behind, a creature trapped in a mirror that shows only the faces of others, never its own. But as we step back into the world of Kanto, there is another soul that refuses to be contained. A soul that, unlike Ditto, is not a failed copy of something else. It is a soul that was deliberately broken, a soul that was murdered, and a soul that refuses to be owned even in death. This is the ghost of the Pokémon Tower, and it is the one creature in all of the original games that cannot be caught. In the earliest days of your journey as a trainer, you are told that every Pokémon can be captured. The Pokéball is a universal key, a device that compresses living matter into data, storing it as a tiny sphere of light. The system is absolute. You can catch a fire-breathing lizard, a god of the sea, a creature that warps space itself. But in the Tower of Lavender Town, the system fails. A ghost appears, shimmering in the dim light of the eternally gloomy floors. You cannot battle it. You cannot throw a ball at it. It is simply there, a presence that refuses to be digitized. The game mechanics are clear. Without the Sylph scope, the ghost is untouchable. Its sprite is a mere silhouette, a formless blur against the background of tombstones and stained glass. You can walk through it. You can try to use a Pokéball, but the game will not let you. It is a wall in the world, a barrier that breaks the fourth law of this universe. Every creature can be contained. Every creature except this one. When you finally obtain the Sylph scope from the top of the tower, after helping Mr. Fuji reclaim his home from Team Rocket, you return to that same spot. The scope, a device designed to see into the spectral spectrum, reveals the true form of the ghost. It is a Marowak, a mother. She holds a bone, her skull visible through the translucent body, and her eyes are hollow with grief. The game then asks you to battle her, to defeat her spirit, to send her onward, but the mystery lingers. Why did she appear as a ghost that could not be caught? Why did the Pokéball fail? The answer lies not in the game's code, but in its story. This Marowak was killed by Team Rocket. They murdered her for some unknown purpose, perhaps to steal her cub, perhaps simply for sport. Her spirit did not rest. It remained in the tower, bound by injustice and grief. And when you first encountered her, she was not a Pokémon in the conventional sense. She was a lingering will, a presence that existed outside the capture system. The Pokéball is designed to convert a living creature into a data stream, to store it in a compressed digital format. But a soul that has already crossed the threshold of death cannot be digitized. It cannot be compressed. It cannot be owned. This is the tragedy of the uncatchable ghost. In a world where even the most powerful legendaries can be caged in a tiny sphere, this one mother refuses to be contained. She is not a Pokémon anymore. She is a memory, a scar on the fabric of reality. Team Rocket took her life, but they could not take her will. And when you finally defeat her in battle, you are not catching her, you are releasing her. You are giving her the peace that the system could never provide. The developers could have made her catchable. They could have placed a standard encounter trigger, but they didn't. They chose to create a being that breaks the fundamental rule of the game, and in doing so, they left a permanent question. What other spirits exist in the cracks of this world? What other souls refuse to be datafied? The ghost of the Pokémon Tower is not a glitch like MissingNo. It is not a failed clone like Ditto. It is a deliberate, emotional protest against the very mechanics of the adventure. It is a reminder that some things cannot be owned. And as we leave the tower that once held the body of a mother, we might wonder if other such ghosts lurk in the shadows of other regions. There is a story, for example, told in the halls of Lumiose City. A tale of a girl who appears in an empty room, who speaks only to vanish, who leaves no trace in the data. That is the next chapter we will step into. A ghost that is not a Pokémon at all, but something far more elusive. We left Lavender Town with the spirit of a Marowak, a mother murdered by Team Rocket, a ghost trapped in the tower, unable to rest until her child was avenged. That mystery was, in its own way, resolved. You found the Sylph scope, you saw her true form, you fought her spirit, and you allowed her to pass on. But what happens when a ghost has no such resolution? When the game introduces a spirit and then simply walks away, leaving her to haunt not just a building, but the very fabric of the narrative. For that, we travel to the Kalos region, to the gleaming Art Deco streets of Lumiose City. It is a city of lights, of towering glass buildings, of endless sidewalks and crowded cafes. A city that feels alive, buzzing with trainers, with fashion, with the smell of freshly baked bread from the many patisseries. But beneath that polished surface, there is a crack, a faint, cold draft that seeps from one particular high-rise building. And inside that building, on a floor that looks like any other office hallway, you will meet someone you were never meant to forget. The first time you enter that building, nothing seems out of place. It is a standard Pokémon Center, or perhaps a training facility. I do not recall the exact function, because it doesn't matter. What matters is that you are there, walking on the second floor, or maybe the third. The camera is fixed in that familiar top-down perspective. You press the control pad to move your character forward, and then you see her. She is standing at the end of the hall, a young girl dressed in a white dress, with long dark hair that falls past her shoulders. She is facing away from you, motionless. In a game full of NPCs who turn to greet you, who wave, who offer items or battle challenges, she does nothing. You inch closer, curious, and when you get within a few steps of her position, she speaks. No, you're not the one. That is the only line of dialogue she ever delivers. No name, no explanation, no quest marker, no follow-up. As soon as those words leave her lips, she turns, or rather, she begins to sink. Her body descends through the floor, as if the solid tiles beneath her had become water. Within seconds, she is gone, and you are standing alone in an empty hallway, the ambient city noise humming from outside the windows. And that is it. The game never mentions her again. There is no side quest, no hidden item, no letter in her memory. She simply exists as a single, haunting encounter that you can have only once per playthrough. In the years since Pokémon X and Y were released in 2013, players have scoured the game's data, searched for triggers, for hidden dialogue, for anything that might reveal her identity. Nothing substantial has ever been found. The most widespread theory is that she is the ghost of a girl who died in that building, perhaps in a fire or an accident. The phrase "no, you're not the one" suggests she is waiting for someone specific, a sibling, a friend, a lost love. She is searching, and when she sees you, she realizes you are not the person she hoped to find. So she sinks away, back into whatever realm she occupies, to continue her vigil. But what makes this mystery so deeply unsettling is not the lack of an answer. It is the deliberate, almost cruel way the game sets up this moment and then refuses to resolve it. In Lavender Town, the ghost of the Marowak had a purpose. You were meant to free her. The game gave you a Sylph scope, a boss fight, a cathartic closure. In Lumiose City, there is no such closure. The ghost girl is not a puzzle to be solved. She is a splinter of tragedy left embedded in the world. A reminder that not every story gets a happy ending. Think about the context of modern Pokémon games. Starting with Generation 6, the series began to lean heavily into theme of life and death, of spirits and unresolved pasts. In Kalos alone, we have the ultimate weapon, which wiped out countless lives during a war 3,000 years ago. We have the ghost of a former champion, a Zed, who roams the region carrying the guilt of his actions. And then we have this anonymous girl, tucked away in a random building, with no connection to any legendary, no impact on the story. She is a ghost in the most literal sense, a remnant of a narrative that was never written. Some players have speculated that she might be an early version of a character that was cut from the game. Perhaps she was originally meant to be part of a side quest involving the ghost-type gym leader, Valerie, or even a tie-in to the Pokémon Tower from earlier generations, but there is no evidence. The developers at Game Freak have never acknowledged her in interviews. She is a footnote in the game's code, a deliberate anomaly, and that is the core of what makes her so memorable. You cannot forget her. Once you have heard that line, you will always feel as though you are being watched as you walk through Lumiose City. Every shadow in an alley, every flicker of a street lamp, every reflection in a window might be her, waiting for the right person. But you are not the one, and you never will be. This theme of unresolved spirits, of ghosts that serve no narrative purpose other than to exist, carries through the entire franchise. From the creepy girl in the old chateau in Pokémon Diamond and Pearl, who laughs and vanishes, to the spectral butler in the abandoned castle in Black and White, the Pokémon world is littered with reminders that death is not always a clean break. The modern era, with its higher fidelity graphics and more complex storytelling, has only made these encounters more jarring. We expect a payoff. We expect a side quest. Instead, we get a glimpse of something that should not be there. And then we are left alone with our questions. So the ghost of the Lumiose City building remains. She waits, and every time a new player steps onto that second floor, she will turn and say those same 5 words. And then she will sink through the floor, leaving behind a silence that is somehow louder than any explanation could be. That silence is the thread that connects her to another mystery, one that has haunted the Pokémon anime for even longer, a character who is present from the very first episode, but whose face we never see, a ghost of a different kind, a hole in the story that has never been filled. We will turn to that absence next, as we examine the search for Ash Ketchum's father. The ghost girl in Lumiose City asks a question that hangs in the air long after she fades through the floor. No, you are not the one. She is waiting, searching. The player character is not the answer she needs. This moment of rejection, of a spectral figure looking for a specific soul, draws a thread to the longest running silence in the animated history of the Pokémon world. The absence of Ash Ketchum's father, the search for a missing person, is the oldest ghost story there is. But what happens when the missing person was never truly present in the story to begin with? Over 25 years of the anime, across countless regions, dozens of movies, and 1,000 battles, the father of the protagonist has never been named. He has never been shown. He exists as a void, a deliberate absence in the family portrait of the Ketchum household. Let's sit with the Delia Ketchum mystery for a moment. She lives alone in a quiet house on the edge of Pallet Town. There is a Mr. Mime who helps with the chores, a kindly Pokémon who acts as a de facto caretaker. But there is no husband, no photograph on the mantle, no letter on the fridge. When Ash leaves on his journey, she watches him go with a mother's worry, but she never speaks of a man who might be watching over him somewhere. The grammar of her dialogue is specific. She never uses the past tense. She never says, "Your father would have been proud." She never says, "Your father was a great trainer." The past tense is absent. This implies that within the reality of the show, he is not dead. He is simply unreachable. He is out there. Or perhaps she simply does not know where he is. The silence is maintained so perfectly that it becomes a character in itself. The fan theories have tried to fill this void for decades. They give the silence a shape, because a blank space is difficult for the human mind to accept. One theory suggests he is a legendary trainer, perhaps the champion of a region we have never seen. Watching Ash's journey from the shadows, measuring his son against a standard only he can see. Another theory ties directly into the quiet trauma of the Kanto region itself, the implied war. He might be a casualty of a conflict so deeply buried in subtext that its only remaining scar is an orphaned generation of trainers and a landscape filled with hospitals and men who do not battle. Then there is the darker theory, something more sinister. Perhaps he encountered something in the woods surrounding Pallet Town. Something the game and the anime have never documented. A creature or an event that erased him so completely that the narrative cannot speak his name. And finally, the quietest theory, the one that aligns most closely with the show's refusal to answer. He simply left. No death, no legend, no war, just a man who walked away. For a child, this absence is the hardest to reconcile. A death provides closure. A hero provides a legacy. A void is just a question that never receives an answer. This is the narrative choice the creators made. The decision to leave a hole in the protagonist's heart that the show refuses to fill. Ash is a character defined by his forward momentum. He leaves home, he makes friends, he loses, he wins, he moves to the next region. He never looks back. Perhaps this is because there is nothing in that rearview mirror but an empty house. The story is about the bonds of friendship, but the fundamental bond is missing. It makes Ash an independent traveller. It also makes him a sad one. The search for mastery, for badges, for the title of Pokémon Master becomes a search for a surrogate. Professor Oak is a mentor. Brock is a caretaker. His Pokémon a family. But the father figure is a ghost in the architecture of the narrative. This specific absence in the Ketchum family tree is not isolated. It is a microcosm of a broader silence that settles over the entire Kanto region. Look at the overworld map of the original games. Look at the demographics. The towns are full of children and the elderly. Where are the parents of a certain age? The hospitals are extensive. The lore implies a conflict, a devastating war that pruned an entire generation from society. The father of the protagonist is missing. The fathers of the region are missing. The silence of Delia's house is just one brick in a wall of silence built over an entire landscape, a wall that prevents a history of pain from seeping into the sunlight. This is the structural spine of the whole tragedy. The personal void of one boy mirrors the demographic void of a region, a hollow sound in the architecture of Kanto that tells a story without ever speaking a word of it. The previous chapter left us with a question that the anime has spent over 25 years refusing to answer. Where is Ash Ketchum's father? His absence is a hole in the centre of what is supposed to be a simple, happy story. A family reduced to a mother and a son. A portrait with a figure torn out of the frame. It is easy to write this off as a quirk of a children's show that simply didn't want to define a parent, a plot hole. But what if the silence itself is the story? What if the missing father of Pallet Town is not an anomaly, but the single most obvious clue in the entire mythos? Because when you step back from the anime and look at the Kanto region as it is drawn in the original games, you realise something chilling. Ash's family is not unique. The absence of a father is not a personal tragedy. It is a demographic scar. Look closely at the civilians who populate the world of red and blue. The cities are filled with young children, setting out on their journeys. Bug catchers and lassies fill the routes, just barely old enough to hold a Pokéball. The towns are populated with elderly people offering advice. Women like Delia Ketchum run the homes alone, but there is a strange, deliberate vacuum in the middle. Where are the middle-aged men aside from the gym leaders and a handful of scientists like Professor Oak? Where are the fathers, the uncles, the everyday working men between the age of 25 and 50? In the real world, that demographic forms the backbone of any society. In Kanto, they are almost entirely absent from the civilian population. This isn't a technical limitation of the sprite art. This is a world that has been hollowed out. And when you start looking at the infrastructure that remains, the reason for that hollowing becomes disturbingly clear. Kanto is not built like a peaceful region. It is built like a nation that has been through a catastrophe and is still standing at attention. Consider the sheer density of Pokémon centers. These are not simple clinics, they are trauma centers, placed within walking distance of nearly every route. A peacetime society does not require dozens of fully staffed emergency hospitals on every street corner. The Pokémon Center network is not a convenience for travelers, it is a survival net, designed for a population that expects constant injury. And then there is the Pokémon League itself. The path to becoming a champion is not a mere sporting circuit. It is an 8-tier hierarchy of combat, a brutal survival course through Victory Road, and a final stand against an Elite Four, built specifically to break the spirit of the challenger. The badges are not trophies, they are proof of combat effectiveness. The structure has far more in common with a military academy than a children's hobby. The entire system is a funnel designed to produce the most battle-hardened trainers in the world. It is a machine built to test warriors, not hobbyists. This entire theory rests on a single piece of dialogue from a character who has no reason to lie. In the Vermilion City Gym, you face Lieutenant Surge. The man carries a military rank as his title. His gym is constructed like a bunker, a maze of locked doors and switch-operated traps. When you challenge him, he looks at the player character, a 10-year-old child, and explicitly breaks the fourth wall of the world's institutional silence. He says, "I tell you, kid, Pokémon saved my life. In the war, my electric Pokémon kept me from getting zapped." He says, the war, not a conflict, not a skirmish. The war, it is the only time in the entire original generation of games that a character directly acknowledges that a large-scale, catastrophic conflict has occurred. Surge survived it. He has the scars to prove it. His challenge is a test of raw, overwhelming force, not finesse or strategy. He treats the gym battle like a combat drill against a rookie recruit. The war is not ancient history to him. It is the defining event of his life, and the rest of the world refuses to speak about it. This is where the silent tragedy of the player character becomes clear. You, the child setting out from Pallet Town with your starter Pokémon, are not the start of a new story. You are the first generation born after the silence. Think about the structure of your own family in the game. Your mother lives alone. Your father is never mentioned, never seen. There is a strong implied theory that he is simply gone, a casualty of the very war that Surge survived. You are being sent out at the age of 10 to capture creatures and prove yourself, not just for the sake of adventure, but because the Kanto region needs a new generation of commanders. The peace is fragile. The League is a militarized hierarchy, starving for fresh recruits. Your journey is not a vacation. It is a quiet, unspoken conscription into the next generation of defense. This explains the unwavering seriousness of Nurse Joy. It explains the constant surveillance of Officer Jenny. It explains the empty spaces on the routes where adults should be walking home from work. The entire apparatus of Kanto, the centers, the gyms, the victory roads, is a system designed to prevent the catastrophe from ever happening again. The silence is not a failure of storytelling. It is a symptom of trauma, a region that does not speak of its dead because the loss is too vast to articulate. Look at the map of the region itself. The routes are not designed for leisurely exploration. They are linear corridors between fortified settlements. Key points like Saffron City are locked down, requiring military authorization in the form of a drink or a lift from a trained Pokémon. The landscape bears the planning of a territory that was once a battlefield. The ghost of the war is written into the very soil. The absence of your father is not just a hole in your family tree, it is a hole in the population, a demographic void left by a conflict that the history books burned from the record. The silence is the loudest part of the game. So the question is no longer just, where are the fathers? The question is, what happened to them? What kind of war was so devastating that it erased an entire generation of men from the landscape, and yet left almost no trace in the official history of the world? The clues are scattered everywhere. In the bunker of Lieutenant Surge, in the towers of Lavender Town, where the ghosts of the departed are said to linger, in the empty chairs at dinner tables, across the entire region. The trail is cold, but the evidence is solid. The silence is about to be broken. In our next chapter, we will dig into the mud of the battlefield. We will analyze the explicit testimony of the soldiers who came back. We will reconstruct the conflict from the scars left on the land and ask the question the games have been dodging for over 25 years. What really happened in? The previous chapter left us standing on the edge of a void, a demographic hole carved into the heart of Kanto. We noticed the absence first, the lack of middle-aged men, the quiet hum of too many medical facilities operating at capacity, the lingering militaristic structure that the League itself was built upon. It felt like a shadow cast backward by something we were never meant to see. And when you look closer, when you stop accepting the surface of the world and start reading the space between the lines, you begin to piece together the evidence of a war between Kanto and Yoto that had to have decimated the adult population. It is the only explanation that fits the silence. You do not need a sylph scope to see this ghost. It is written into the very geography of the region. The Seafoam Islands, cold and abandoned, their strategic tunnels left to freeze. The rock tunnel, a dark scar through the mountain that feels less like a natural cave and more like a passage built for movement during a siege. The power plant, gutted and hollow, its walls thick as a bunker, its machines stripped of purpose. And then there are the men who remain. Lieutenant Surge, the Lightning American, speaks of war in his gym without metaphor. He does not talk of friendly competition. He says his Pokémon saved him in combat. He calls them his little soldiers. It is the only direct confession in the entire franchise. One man, standing in a gym in Vermilion City, telling the truth while the rest of the world has agreed to bury it. But why the history books in the games are silent about this conflict is the deeper question. It is not an oversight. It is an institutional choice. The Pokémon world teaches its history very carefully. Ancient wars become myths. Calamities become legends. But a war between Kanto and Yoto would be recent within living memory. Professor Oak would have been young enough to fight. The elderly men in Pewter City, the ones who sit quietly and speak of their grandsons, they carry the exhausted gaze of survivors. The silence feels like a pact, a societal agreement to refuse the memory so completely that the next generation, a generation of child trainers, can grow up believing the only battles worth fighting end, with a handshake and a trip to the Pokémon Center, but the environment cannot lie. The hospitals are not for sprained ankles. The graves in Lavender Town are not filled with natural deaths. This brings us to the role of Pokémon as weapons of mass destruction, and the trauma left behind in the survivors. A war fought with living creatures is not the same as a war fought with machines. A bullet is a piece of metal. A Pokémon is a bond, a trust, a soul. To weaponize that bond is to break something sacred. Imagine a battlefield where an alakazam shatters the minds of a battalion before a single shot is fired. Imagine a Gengar draining the life from a city block in a single night. Imagine an army of Arcanine burning a forest to ash, with the trainers they love standing behind them. The survivors would not just carry scars from what they saw, they would carry the weight of what they commanded. The Pokémon themselves would carry the trauma. Look at the Cubone. The Cubone wears the skull of its mother. No Pokédex entry has ever explained where that bone comes from. But the theory has always whispered that the mother died violently. What war created that orphan? What field of battle became the origin of that grief? The Lavender Tower is not just a place to bury a pet. It is a memorial to a massacre, the ghosts that haunt it, the Marowak, the spirits that cannot rest. They are not malevolent. They are the echoes of a conflict that was never properly mourned. And this is where the theory meets its darkest possible truth. The institutional silence is not just a form of societal healing. It is a massive cover-up of war crimes. Not the crimes of a single nation, but the crime of weaponizing the bond between human and Pokémon for mass destruction. The Pokémon League was not founded by peacekeepers. It was founded by generals who had seen the worst of what their world could become. The entire gym system is a way to contain that power. The badges are not just trophies, they are licenses, a test of character, a filter to ensure that the next generation will wield their strength responsibly. The Elite Four are not just masters, they are gatekeepers. The entire structure is a cage built by survivors to contain the beast they helped create. If you walk through Kanto today, you see a world that has been carefully healed, but the scars are still there, visible in the loneliness of the adults, the disproportionate number of widows and widowers, the way the old speak of the journey, as if it is a sacred duty rather than a childhood adventure. It is a world that looked into the abyss and decided to simply turn its back and whistle a quiet tune. The war theory remains unconfirmed. It is a ghost in the system, a shadow cast by details that do not add up. But the silence itself is the evidence, and when you learn to listen to the silences, the Pokémon world begins to speak in a much darker language. This silence, this deliberate hole in history, finds its echo in another mystery we have not yet touched, a story that has been told so many times that its edges have worn smooth, its truth buried under the weight of its own telling. A legend about a trainer who changed the world, whose actions have been so thoroughly mythologized that the original facts have become indistinguishable from fantasy. The hero of many tales. We've spent the last 20 chapters walking through the broken windows of the Pokémon world. The ghosts that cling to Lavender Town's tower. The silent stairs of Lumiose where a girl still asks if you are the one. The empty chair at the Ketchum dinner table. And the graveyards of Kanto that no history book will name. We piece together the evidence of a war between Kanto and Yorda. A conflict so thorough in its erasure that only the architecture remembers. The hospitals that stand too close together. The middle-aged men who are either gym leaders or scientists. And the complete absence of anyone who might have held a rifle. But that war is not the only shadow cast across this world's past. There are older silences, deeper gaps, and in two regions, Aldea and Unova, the stone and soil whisper of heroes who once walked and then vanished, leaving behind artifacts that hum with a power we cannot replicate today. Let's begin in Unova, a region that wears its history like a scar. If you visit the Relic Castle, buried under the desert of Route 4, you can still feel the heat of a battle that took place 3,000 years ago. The castle was once the seat of a kingdom ruled by two brothers, and at the centre of their story is a hero. Though the hero's name has been forgotten, the legend speaks of a young man who came from a distant land, carrying a sword and a shield that were not made of metal, they were made of light. He united the warring brothers, but only for a moment. Then the brothers turned on each other, and the hero vanished. The castle sank into the sand, and the only trace left behind is a set of stone tablets etched with a language no scholar can fully translate. These tablets describe a weapon that could split the sky, and a Pokémon that served as the hero's companion. A Pokémon that the tablets call the one who makes the earth tremble. Today, that Pokémon is known as Landorus, but its true form, its Therian form, is only ever glimpsed when the wind blows a certain way. The artifacts left behind, the stone tablets, the fragments of a crown shaped like a helix, suggest a level of technology that seems impossible for 3,000 years ago. Metal alloys that don't rust, glass that bends light into patterns we still can't reproduce. And if you look closely at the carvings on the castle walls, you'll see a figure with a staff that ends in a spiral. That same spiral appears on the Pokédex of ancient times, the one known as the GS Ball. But that's a story for another night. Now cross the ocean to Paldea, where the cliffs of the great crater of Paldea guard a secret that the Pokémon League has actively tried to bury in the university town of Messagoza. The history department teaches a sanitized version of the region's past. Paldea was settled by explorers from the east. They brought Pokémon with them, and the land was peaceful. But if you speak to the old rangers who patrol the Asado Desert, they'll tell you about the hero of many tales, a figure spoken of in the songs of the first settlers, a warrior who rode a Pokémon that could control time itself. The hero is said to have descended from the sky in a chariot made of crystal, carrying a staff that could heal wounds and raise mountains. The songs claim that the hero defeated a great darkness at the bottom of the crater and then sealed it away with a lock that required 3 keys. Those keys are now the sacred treasures of Paldea, the Vessel of Ruin, the Tablets of Ruin, the Beads of Ruin, and the Sword of Ruin, each one a relic of unimaginable power, each one guarded by a legendary Pokémon that is said to be the physical manifestation of the hero's rage and sorrow. The artifacts themselves, the cracked urn, the stone slab, the rusted beads, the broken blade, are kept in the deepest vaults of the Paldean League. They are never displayed, they are never studied, and the reason, according to a former intern at the archaeology department, is that the last time a researcher tried to activate them, the sky turned black for 3 days. But the silence around these heroes is not accidental. It is a deliberate erasure, a policy that stretches back centuries. The modern curriculum in both Unova and Paldea teaches children that the ancient heroes are myths or folk tales, stories made up to explain natural phenomena. The crater of Paldea is described as a volcanic caldera. The relic castle is a tourist attraction. The stone tablets are early attempts at writing. Yet every Pokémon professor knows the truth. There is a memo circulated internally within the International Police that dates back to the founding of the League. It states, and I paraphrase, "No historical evidence of a hero should be preserved in any official record. All references to the hero's artifacts should be reclassified as mythological objects or religious iconography. Any citizen claiming to possess knowledge of the hero must be reported to the nearest League representative immediately." This memo was classified until a data leak in 2022, when a hacker known only as Ghost299 released a cache of documents from the Unovan League archives. Among them was a photograph of a stone doorway found beneath the desert resort, carved with a single sentence in an unknown script. Below the sentence, someone had written in pen, "He is not gone. He is sleeping. Why erase a hero? What threat could a figure from 3,000 years ago pose to a modern government?" The answer lies in the connection between these lost heroes and the legendary Pokémon that now roam the wild. In Unova, the hero's companion was Landorus, one of the forces of nature, a trio of Pokémon that can control the weather and reshape the landscape. In Paldea, the hero of many tales is linked to the legendary quartet known as the Treasures of Ruin: Chi-Yu, Chien-Pao, Ting-Lu, and Wo-Chien. Pokémon that were once human emotions given form, locked away for centuries because their power was too dangerous to be free. The hero's staff, the one that could heal and raise mountains, is said to be the key that could release them again. And if the hero is sleeping, perhaps the League fears that the hero will wake, that the hero will reclaim those artifacts, that the hero will remember why they left. The legends say the hero of Paldea vanished into the crater one night, and the ground closed behind them. No one saw them leave. No body was ever found, but the Pokémon that served them, the great serpent of the sky, the stag of the forest, remained, roaming the wild as if waiting for a command that never comes. In Unova, the hero simply walked into the desert and never returned. The brothers who had fought over power eventually died, and the kingdom crumbled, but the hero's sword and shield, the ones made of light, were never recovered. Some say they are buried underneath the castle of the ancients. Others claim they were taken by the legendary dragon that split into 3, Reshiram, Zekrom and Kyurem. That dragon, the original one of Unova, is said to have been the hero's true partner, and the hero's disappearance, the myth goes, happened because the dragon could not bear to watch humanity fight over its power, so the dragon tore itself apart, and the hero faded into the spaces between the pieces. Tonight, as you drift, consider this. What if the hero of Paldea and the hero of Unova are the same person, the same figure, carrying a staff that spirals like the GS ball, riding a being that bends time? What if the Pokémon world's history is not a series of disconnected myths, but a single long war, with a single champion who has been erased from every chapter. The curriculum teaches children that legends are just stories, but the artifacts remain, the stone doors remain, and the Pokémon that wait, Landorus, Chi-Yu, the ancient giants of the crater, they do not age, they do not forget. And that is the mystery we will take into the dark with us. The deliberate silence around the hero's identity, the secrets locked inside the Pokédex entries that call them myths, and the true nature of the world before the League sealed the history books. In our next chapter, we will look at the mechanisms of that erasure, the institutions, the policies, and the people who decided that some stories are too dangerous to tell. That chapter is called The Erasure of Ancient History, and it will show you the fingerprints on the knife that cut the hero from the timeline. Until then, sleep well, and if you dream of a desert castle with a spiral carved into its walls, remember, the hero is not gone, the hero is sleeping, and in the silence of the crater, the keys are still waiting. I hope you're as amazed by this as I am. If you want to stay updated on more content like this, make sure to subscribe and join our community of curious minds. Trust me, what's coming next will challenge everything you thought you knew. But if these heroes and their artifacts were real, if they truly wielded powers we can barely comprehend, then why has so little of that knowledge survived into the modern era of Pokémon training? Why do the history books we read in the Pokémon Academy feel so clean, so polished, as though the messy edges of the past have been deliberately sanded away? The answer might not be the slow erosion of time, but something much more deliberate. A policy of silence enforced by the very institutions that claim to preserve the world's legacy. Consider the official account of the universe's creation. Every child in the Pokémon world grows up learning that long ago, in a void of nothingness, an egg came into being. From that egg hatched Arceus, the original one, and with its 1,000 arms it shaped the cosmos. It then created Dialga to govern time, and Palkia to govern space, and from there the world as we know it came into existence. This is the story endorsed by the Pokémon League, told in museums and textbooks, repeated in the teachings of the Sinnoh region's ancient lore. It is a neat, comforting narrative, a single divine origin that places Arceus at the center of existence. But if you listen closely to the whispers of the past, if you dig beneath the surface of that accepted truth, you begin to find traces of something else, fragments of heretical theories, suppressed so thoroughly that they exist only in the margins of archaeological reports and in the memories of those who venture into the forbidden ruins of the world. The League, whether acting out of fear or pragmatism, has worked for decades to control the narrative of creation. Any theory that contradicts the official story is dismissed as cultish nonsense, dangerous speculation, and anyone who persists in exploring these alternatives is quietly discouraged. There is no better evidence of this suppression than the mystery of the sealed chambers. Located across the Hoenn region, hidden beneath the waters of Route 134, buried in deserts, and locked behind the canvas of a remote island. These chambers contain messages written entirely in Braille, a script that predates the modern Pokémon writing system by an unknown length of time. The messages are simple, but their implications are vast. They speak of a forgotten civilization that worshipped not Arceus, but something else, something they called the Golems. Their inscriptions describe a people who could shape stone, who built structures that could withstand the ages, and who locked away these golems inside the chambers, perhaps to protect the world from themselves. The Braille tells us how to awaken these golems, but it does not tell us why they were sealed, and the questions multiply the deeper you go. Who were these people? Why did they vanish? And most unsettlingly, why does the Pokémon League refuse to fund any official excavation of these chambers? The sites are open to trainers, yes, but there is no attempt to study or preserve them. They are treated as puzzles for the curious, not as archaeological treasures. It is as if the League wants the chambers to be seen as mere gameplay mechanics, just another side quest to be completed and forgotten. But if you look closer at the construction of these chambers, you notice something. The geometry is wrong. The angles do not align with any known architectural style from any recorded region. The stones are cut with a precision that suggests tools beyond what should have existed in that era. And the Braille itself is not a natural evolution of language. It appears fully formed, as if it were gifted to that civilization, rather than developed over time. Some researchers, speaking off the record, have suggested that the Braille may actually be a form of communication left behind by an extraterrestrial or extra-dimensional intelligence. But when these theories reach the public, they are quickly debunked by League-affiliated scholars who claim the script is merely an early form of written Pokémon language. The real fear, I think, is that the true history of Pokémon would destabilize the entire social order if it were proven that Arceus is not the sole creator, or that the universe was born from a chaotic conflict between entities that predate even Dialga and Palkia. Then the foundation of the Pokémon League's authority would crack. The League was built upon the idea of harmony between humans and Pokémon, a harmony supposedly established by Arceus's design. If that design is revealed to be an illusion, if the past is filled with wars between ancient titans and civilizations that rose and fell in cycles of destruction, then the League's role as the keeper of peace becomes a fragile fiction. There is a specific place in Sinnoh, the Sinjo ruins, where the veil between the legendaries seems thin. Here, the unknown gather, those strange, symbol-shaped creatures that float in clusters, each one a letter of an alphabet that predates the current written word. The unknown are themselves a mystery. They are said to be the ancient precursors of all Pokémon, or perhaps the physical embodiment of thought. In the Sinjo ruins, a ceremony can be performed in which a connection is established with Arceus, Dialga and Palkia simultaneously. But what is not widely told is that the Sinjo ruins are also the site of proscribed rituals. There are carvings here that the League has deliberately left out of the official tour guides. Carvings that depict a world being unmade rather than created. Some of these carvings show a figure that is not Arceus, a shadowy form with many eyes, surrounded by flames that seem to consume the stars. And the unknown that float near these carvings behave differently. They move in patterns that suggest a warning, or perhaps a plea. Those who have spent too long in the Sinjo ruins report feeling watched, as if the very stones remember something that should not be remembered. The League has placed permanent guards at the entrance to the deeper chambers, ostensibly to prevent trainers from getting lost. But the guards are not there to protect the trainers, they are there to protect the secret. If you attempt to discuss these findings on public forums, you will find your accounts quickly flagged and deleted. If you write a paper proposing an alternative creation myth based on the Braille of the sealed chambers, the League's historical committee will reject it without peer review. Knowledge is being filtered, not by accident, but by design. The message is clear. Some histories are too dangerous to be known, and yet the past has a way of seeping through the cracks. In the Orange Islands, far from the mainland of Kanto and Yoto, there are legends that have not been fully absorbed into the League's canon. Ancient stories of a hero who rode the currents of the ocean on the back of a dragon. A hero who faced a storm that was not a storm, but a living entity. The islands themselves are dotted with ruins that do not match any known architectural style, and the Pokémon that inhabit them seem to remember a time when the League did not exist. It is there, perhaps, that some of the erased history still lingers, waiting for someone to listen to the whispers of the waves and the silence of the stones. But that is a story for another night, another chapter in the long unraveling of the world's deepest secrets. The last chapter left us in the dusty archives of the Pokémon League, staring at the blank spaces on the page where entire chapters of history have been deliberately cut away. We considered how the myth of Arceus was codified, and how any heretical theory regarding the origins of the universe was systematically suppressed. But history has a way of surviving in the margins. It seeps out through the cracks in the official narrative, often in the most remote and overlooked places. One of those places is the Orange Archipelago, a chain of tropical islands far south of the mainland Kanto region. It exists in a sort of jurisdictional grey zone, suspended between two regions. And it is here, in the quiet isolation of the sea, that we find one of the most troubling physical pieces of evidence that the world was once a much, much different place. The Orange Archipelago is not a formal Pokémon League region. It has its own gym challenge, its own customs, but is treated as a backwater, a footnote. Yet it holds secrets that the Kanto Pokédex has never satisfactorily explained. Specifically, there are temples here, ancient structures built of stone and coral that house artifacts. These artifacts are not Pokeballs, they are older, sarcophagi, urns, sealed containers. And the imagery carved into these temples depicts Pokémon we recognize, but in a form we are not meant to see. The local populations here tell stories of regional variants, but not the kind in Alola or Galar. These are stories of giants, the true forms of Pokémon, before they were shrunk down to fit into the modern world. We are speaking specifically of 3 entities sealed away in the islands. An Alakazam that towers over buildings, its spoons so large they could be used as bridges. A Gengar that is less a ghost and more a shadow that swallows the sky. And a Jigglypuff, whose song is not a lullaby for sleep, but a command for silence and stillness that can stop an entire ecosystem. These are the so-called ancient Pokémon. They were not evolved. They were not trained. They were primordial forces that were too dangerous to coexist with. They had to be trapped, bounded by magical artifacts that the Orange Island cultures crafted specifically for containment. The fact that they are trapped at all tells us a chilling story. They could not be killed. The supreme power of the modern Pokémon world, a Master Ball, a legendary capture, was insufficient. They could only be sealed. It is no coincidence that the gym leader of the Orange Islands, a man named Drake, who commands a Dragonite, is one of the few people in the entire world who understands the weight of this silence. His challenge is not just a test of strength, but a test of character. He knows what lurks in the islands. Professor Oak himself was present for the discovery of these entities in the recorded canon. He analysed the energy readings. He confirmed the Pokédex had no data, and then the subject was dropped. The files were never updated. The discovery was treated as a curio, a sideshow, despite the fact it rewrites everything we know about Pokémon biology. He went back to his lab in Pallet Town, and life continued as if the giant Pokémon were a strange dream, an anomaly to be filed away and forgotten. But we know that forgetting is a choice. So why is there no record of these creatures in the National Pokédex? Why was the world of Pokémon training taught that evolution is the only path to strength, ignoring the fact that some ancient examples of the species were infinitely more powerful? The answer lies in the silence of the institutions. The National Pokédex is a tool of normalization. It documents the species that are safe, predictable, and usable in the framework of the League. A giant Jigglypuff is a threat to the system. It is an anomaly. If the public knew that a stray Jigglypuff, left unchecked for centuries, could revert to a state of terrifying dominance, the foundation of the trainer system would be questioned. Why capture a monster if it might grow to crush your city? The artifacts are spherical, like modern Pokeballs, but they are not mechanical. They are organic or crystalline. They pulse with a trapped life force. They are less tools of capture and more cages of binding. A Pokeball promises partnership. These artifacts promised imprisonment. The League's official protocol has always been to simply ignore these specimens, to label the Orange Island shrines as local folklore and refuse to update the database. It is a soft erasure, but an erasure nonetheless. The implication here is staggering. If 3 relatively common species, Alakazam, Gengar, Jigglypuff, could grow to such proportions, it suggests that the entire world was once dominated by titans. Every Pokémon you see today might be a stunted, domesticated version of a far more formidable ancestor. The evolutionary chains we study are not ceilings. they are flaws. The Pidgeot you send out is not the peak of its potential. It is a creature that has been artificially selected, or perhaps naturally devolved, for a world of peace and hierarchy. The ancient world was not a paradise of trainers and battles. It was a survival game against living catastrophes. The temples of the Orange Islands are not just shrines. They are prison walls, holding back the proof that our current Pokémon world is built on the bones of a far more dangerous age. This pattern of institutional silence runs deeper than geography. It exists in the very data we trust. The Pokédex itself, our guide to the world, is full of entries that openly admit ignorance. It tells us things like what lurks inside the shell is a mystery. It describes biology that flatly violates the laws of physics without explanation. But what if the dark entries in the Pokédex are not just gaps in knowledge? What if they are warnings, deliberately corrupted, or worse, deliberately left vague to hide the true nature of the creatures we carry in our pockets? The relationship between the trainer and the partner is built on trust. But the foundation of that trust is a database that keeps secrets. These secrets, the ones the Pokédex refuses to clarify, they point to a shadow behind the screen, a truth so unsettling that the documentation itself had to be flawed. That is exactly what we will explore next, in Chapter 24, The Dark Side of the Pokédex. The sealed artifacts of the Orange Islands left us contemplating the silence of history. Giant Pokémon, locked away in temples, their power deemed too dangerous for the open world. But what if the most dangerous information isn't locked away in a temple, but is handed freely to every 10-year-old who walks out of a professor's lab? What if the warnings are deliberately hidden in plain sight, written in clinical language, inside a device we are taught to trust implicitly? Consider the Pokédex entry for Drifloon, the balloon Pokémon. It appears as a seemingly innocent creature, a purple balloon with a happy face. In the world of the games, it is described as a must-have for children, a whimsical companion for a day out. But the Pokédex entry paints a very different picture. It states plainly that Drifloon grabs the hands of children, pulling them towards the afterlife. It is explicitly a child predator, documented as such by the very system that encourages trainers to capture it. This is not an inconsistency in the lore. It is a deliberate pattern. Phantump is the spirit of a dead child possessing a tree stump. Yamask stares at the mask it carries, knowing it used to be its own face in a past life. Litwick mimics a welcoming lighthouse, but its flame drains the life force of those who draw near. Each entry provides a deeply disturbing, almost supernatural backstory for a creature that looks innocent and playful. The Pokédex is not shy about telling you that the monster you just befriended is by nature a homunculus driven by tragedy and hunger. This stark contrast between appearance and reality forms the core of the modern Pokédex dilemma. It is a tool that simultaneously documents biology and folklore, and it never fully commits to either discipline. It begs a profound question. Is the Pokédex a legitimate scientific instrument, database of empirical facts observed by trained professors? Or is it a collection of campfire stories, a global anthology of warnings designed specifically to keep children afraid of the wild? On the surface, it functions as a database. It catalogues height, weight, type, and habitat. But the flavor text transcends biology. It delves into psychology, local superstition, and sociology. It tells you of a creature, not just its data. It tells you that Hypno leads children to be lost forever. It tells you that Gengar is a shadow that lowers the temperature of the room, waiting for its prey to expire. These are not the dry, cautious observations of a field biologist. They are the warnings of a village elder. It suggests that the Pokédex is a tool of social control, a way to codify the dangers of the world so that a young trainer cannot claim ignorance. The world is dangerous, and the Pokédex is the warning label printed on the box. And yet, the source of these warnings remains a profound mystery. Take a moment to consider the identity of the author. Who actually writes the Pokédex? Professor Oak is credited as the creator of the Kanto device, but the entries are attributed to regional professors across the entire world. How can one scientist confirm the tragic backstory of every single species? The Pokédex entries often contradict themselves between generations. In one game, Magcargo is hotter than the surface of the sun. In the next generation, that fact is quietly omitted because it is physically impossible for a living creature to exist at that temperature. This suggests a fluid and deeply unreliable editorial process. Perhaps the Pokédex is a living document, updated by the League or by regional researchers, but based on anecdotal evidence and local legend rather than hard science. Maybe a haunted professor added the ghost stories out of respect for the dead. Maybe the entries are crowdsourced from trainers, their personal tragedies turned into accepted canon. The mystery of who writes these entries and why they are allowed to remain so ambiguous is a reflection of the Pokémon world itself. It tells you exactly what you need to be afraid of, but it never explains who decided you should feel that fear. The entries are not just scary, they are often deeply tragic. The Cubone entry tells us that the skull it wears on its head belongs to its deceased mother. The origin of this bone is never fully clarified by the game, leaving the creature in a state of perpetual mourning, a walking monument to a crime or a natural tragedy we will never fully understand. This is the true dark side of the Pokédex. It burdens the player with the knowledge of a trauma that can never be healed. It turns the act of catching a Pokémon into an act of rescue, or sometimes an act of possession. You are not just collecting a creature, you are taking it away from a life of haunting, or worse, being haunted. The device humanizes them in the most painful way possible. This fragmentation of knowledge, this institutional silence that surrounds the true nature of these creatures, is the defining characteristic of the history of the Pokémon world. They trust you with the warning, but not the full narrative. The next time you open your Pokédex, consider the vast gap between what is said and what is deliberately left out. There is a specific location in Kanto that exemplifies this silence perfectly. A place where the infrastructure is broken, the machines are dead, and the only thing left is a mechanical void where an answer should be. A mystery that the Pokédex cannot even begin to explain. This is the story of the mystery of the power plant. In the next chapter, we will walk through its darkened halls and ask what truly happened there when the lights went out forever. The Pokédex tells you what a Pokémon can do in the dark, but the power plant tells you what humanity can do when it builds something it does not fully understand. It is a different kind of dark side, and it is waiting for us. In the last chapter, we explored how the Pokédex often records disturbing truths about the creatures we think we know, how a cute exterior can hide a predatory nature, or a deeply tragic origin. The Pokédex is a tool of classification, but its silence is sometimes louder than its words, and that silence extends far beyond the entries of individual Pokémon. It extends to the very places where they live, and where humanity tried to harness them. There is a building in Kanto. It sits in a desolate stretch of open water, just off the coast of Route 10. From the outside, it appears as little more than a dark angular box anchored to the seafloor. The exterior is unmarked concrete and rusting metal service doors. It is easily one of the most unsettling locations in the entire first generation of games. It is called the Power Plant. It was, for all intents and purposes, a marvel of modern engineering, built to channel the natural electrical currents of the region and convert them into usable energy for the cities. Yet, when the player character arrives in the timeline of the games, it is completely abandoned. The main gate is locked. The generators are silent. The halls are pitch black. The standard story we are told is simple. It was overrun by wild electric-type Pokémon after a malfunction. But let us sit with that word for a moment. Overrun. Pokémon are not pests. They are not simply vermin. Magnemite, Voltorb, and their evolutions are drawn to electromagnetic fields. They are creatures of energy. If the plant was working correctly, it would have been a paradise for them. They would have gathered around the safe, humming reactors, So why did their presence cause the human workers to flee? Why did they lock the doors and never come back? The plant was built by Sylph Company, the same corporation that gave us the Master Ball, the Sylph Scope, and the technology that powers the Pokémon League itself. Sylph Co. is the apex of human ingenuity in the Kanto region. If a power plant failed, they would normally fix it. They have the resources. They have the scientists. But they did not. They sealed it. They walked away from a massive financial investment, a critical piece of infrastructure, and they never spoke of it again. This brings us to the heart of the mystery. Deep inside that plant, in a chamber shielded from the light of day, lurks a legendary bird, Zapdos, the legendary Pokémon of electric and flying types, a creature usually associated with thunderclouds and the highest peaks of the wilderness. In the games, Zapdos is not found on a mountain. It is found standing in a man-made room, surrounded by twisted metal conduits and broken computer consoles. It is waiting. The question that haunts every dark corner of that facility is simple. Did Zapdos move into the ruins of the plant, finding a comfortable nest of ambient electricity? Or was Zapdos summoned here? The prevailing theory among those who study the deepest cuts of Kanto lore is that the power plant was never just a generator. It was the site of an experiment, a project to create what they called infinite energy. It was meant to be the ultimate power source, feeding the entire region without burning fuel, without needing trainers to battle and generate kinetic energy. It was an attempt to break the fundamental law of conservation, to create energy from nothing, to rip a hole in the natural order and pull power through it. To do something like that, you need a source, you need a core, you need something that can generate that kind of power naturally. You need a living, breathing engine of electricity. The theory is that Sylph Co. acquired a Zapdos, or lured one, or perhaps even created an artificial environment that attracted it. They built the power plant around its nest. They began to drain its power. They were trying to copy its biology, to extract the essence of its legendary energy and feed it into the grid. Something went horribly wrong. The energy they were trying to harness had a consciousness. It had a will. The facility became a battleground between nature and technology. The surge that followed did not just overload the circuits, it warped them. It drew every electric-type Pokémon for miles toward the site, not because they were feeding on the leftover energy, but because they were answering a call. The wild Pokémon came to protect the legendary bird, or perhaps they were mutated by the exposure. The plant became a nest of living electricity, and the humans could not stay. Sylph Co. walked away. They scrubbed the records. They left Zapdos in the deep chamber, a living monument to their failure. In the source text, there is no government inquiry. There is no newspaper article. There is only the closed door, the silence of Sylph Co. Regarding their involvement in the plant's sudden closure is one of the most deafening voids in the entire Kanto map. Why would they let a legendary Pokémon sit in their abandoned facility? Available for any 10-year-old trainer with a good fishing rod to find, the answer is that Sylph Co. did not care about the Pokémon anymore. They cared about the experiment being forgotten. They cared about the secret of infinite energy dying in that dark hall. Think about the implications. Zapdos did not have to stay. It is a legendary being of the storm. It could have torn the roof off and flown into the sun, but it stayed. It remained in the chamber. The most frightening interpretation is that the experiment left a mark on it, that the machinery is still running on some level, keeping it tethered, or worse, that the Zapdos in the power plant is not the real Zapdos. It is a construct, a broken copy, a remnant of the infinite energy project that sat on the throne of the facility, guarding the secret because it is the secret. When a trainer descends into that darkness, they find a place that should not exist, a high-tech facility overrun by electrode and magneton, creatures that glow with an eerie reflected light. The player character walks past the silent turbines and the pools of spilled coolant. They find Zapdos and they capture it, or they defeat it and they leave. But the power plant does not disappear. It sits in the ocean, dark sealed, waiting for the legend to grow back. It is a wound on the world that never healed. This pattern is not unique to Kanto. It is a recurring scar on the face of the Pokémon world, an event with no official record, a presence that haunts a specific place, left unspoken by the powers that be. In the Kalos region, inside the Lumiose city gym, there is a story told not in textbooks or corporate files, but in the shadows cast by the architecture. A spectral figure, a young girl, who vanishes and reappears the moment you turn your back. The game gives you nothing about her, no name, no dialogue, no backstory. She is a ghost, perfectly preserved in the amber of the game code, waiting for a resolution that the developers simply never delivered. She is an experiment in narrative silence, a fragment of a story left unfinished, much like the humming turbines of the abandoned power plant. She stands in the corner of a room, a permanent reminder that some experiments are abandoned, some doors are locked, and some mysteries are never meant to be solved, only felt. The power plant in Kanto stood silent for years, its turbines, once humming with the energy of an entire region, now rusted in the dark. No official explanation was ever given for its abandonment. The machines were left intact, the wiring still live, the electric Pokémon drawn to it like moths to a flame, and at the heart of that derelict facility, a legendary bird Zapdos made its nest. Did it simply wander in, seeking shelter from the storms that brew within its own wings? Or was it summoned there, called by something older than the plant itself? Something the engineers never understood when they built over forgotten foundations. The answer lies buried beneath the concrete, just like so many other truths in the Pokémon world. But tonight, we follow a different ghost. A ghost that doesn't lurk in abandoned factories or ancient towers. A ghost that walks the same roads as you, in broad daylight in the most modern of cities. A ghost that has appeared in not one, not two, but 4 different regions. And as we piece together her story, a chilling possibility emerges. He may be the same being in every encounter, not between cities, but between worlds. You have probably seen her, if you have played the games. In Sinnoh's old chateau, a little girl in a white dress stands in the hallway. She does not speak. She does not move. If you approach her, she vanishes, only to reappear behind you. If you talk to her, she says nothing. The only clue is a diary left in the chateau, written by a child who was terrified of something. The owner of the chateau, a wealthy man, disappeared. The child vanished too, but the ghost remains. In Unova, in a house known as the Strange House, there is another spectral girl. She appears on the 2nd floor, standing by a window. If you interact with her, she fades away. But if you examine a certain bookcase, you can find a hidden message. A note that reads, "I want to see the Pokémon, the one that brings good dreams." That note is a direct link to the Lunar Wing, a legendary item associated with Cresselia, the Pokémon of dreams. The message suggests that this girl was searching for the Lunar Wing to cure her nightmares, but she never found it. Or perhaps she did, and it was too late. In Kalos, the ghost girl appears in a hotel, the Hotel Richissime. She is dressed in a pink and white dress, and she stands in a doorway, staring at the wall. If you approach her from behind, she slowly turns her head and disappears. There is no dialogue, no explanation. But if you examine the mirror in the room next to hers, you can see her reflection. She is real. She is there, and she seems to be waiting for something. In Alola, in the abandoned supermarket, a similar figure appears. She is small, dressed in white, and she stands at the end of an aisle. She does not move unless you walk away. Then she vanishes, only to reappear somewhere else. These encounters are separated by generations, by regions, by entirely different game engines, but they share too many traits to be coincidental. The same posture, the same dress, the same silence, the same disappearance, the same feeling that she is not a random NPC, but a deliberate narrative thread woven into the fabric of the world. And when you connect the dots, a pattern emerges. In Unova, we have a direct textual clue. The girl wanted the Lunar Wing. The lunar wing is used to cure nightmares. Why would a ghost need a cure for nightmares? Unless she is not a ghost that haunts a place, but a ghost that is trapped between sleep and waking, a spirit that cannot rest, because she cannot wake from a dream that has become a nightmare. The strange house itself is a peculiar location. It is also known as the Dream Yard in the original Japanese. It is a house that appears only under certain conditions, and its layout changes depending on the time of day. It is a place that exists between reality and illusion, and the note found there, "I want to see the Pokémon, the one that brings good dreams," is written in a child's handwriting. That child, we can infer, is the ghost girl. She was searching for Cresselia, the dream Pokémon. But Cresselia is associated with the crescent moon, and the lunar wing is its feather. The opposite of Cresselia is Darkrai, the nightmare Pokémon. If the girl was tormented by Darkrai, she would have sought the lunar wing to banish the nightmares, but she died before she could find it. And now she wanders the Pokémon world, appearing in places where the boundary between dreams and reality is thin. The old chateau is a haunted mansion. The Hotel Richissime is a place of luxury and rest. The abandoned supermarket is a place of forgotten things. All are places where sleep, dreams, and liminality converge. But there is an even more unsettling possibility. What if she is not just one ghost, but the same ghost appearing across all these regions, because she is a traveller of the dream world? In the Pokémon universe, there is a legendary Pokémon that controls dreams, Darkrai and Cresselia, but there is also a myth about a being that can move between the world of the living and the world of the dead. The Ghost Girl may be a manifestation of that myth. She is not bound by geography. She can appear anywhere the veil is thin, and she repeats the same action over and over, standing, waiting, disappearing, because she is trapped in a loop of her own unfinished business. The reason the games give us just enough information to haunt us, but never enough to provide closure, is deeply intentional. It mirrors the nature of a ghost story in folklore. A ghost story that explains everything is not scary. A ghost story that gives you a single detail, a note, a reflection, a silent figure, and then leaves you to wonder, that is the kind that follows you to bed. The developers understand this. They planted these girls across the games like breadcrumbs, but they never led to a final resting place, because the mystery itself is the horror. The lack of resolution is the curse. We as players are the ones who are haunted. We are the ones who will never know her name. We are the ones who will never know if she found the lunar wing, or if she is still searching forever. And yet, there is a strange comfort in that. In a world where so many Pokémon mysteries are eventually explained or retconned, the Ghost Girl remains untouched. She is a secret the game keeps from itself, a fragment of a story that was never fully written. She exists in the margins of the code, in the silent spaces between cutscenes, and every time you play she is there, waiting for you to look away so she can disappear. As we drift further into the night, consider this. What if the Ghost Girl is not the only traveller between worlds? There is another ancient story, one that speaks of an ultimate weapon, a war that lasted 3,000 years, and a kingdom turned to stone. That is the subject of our next chapter. The ultimate weapon and the 3,000-year war, a conflict that reshaped an entire region, erased a civilization, and left behind nothing but legends and a single unmoving flower. But that is a mystery for another night. For now, let the Ghost Girl stand in the hallway. Let her watch. Let her wait. And when you close your eyes, know that she is still there, in the dream between dreams, searching for her lunar wing. In our last chapter, we explored the idea of the Ghost Girl as a traveller between worlds, a silent witness existing just out of phase with our reality. That image of a being caught between life and death, between a past they cannot leave and a future they never reach, is perhaps the most haunting image in Pokémon, and it is a fitting precursor to Kalos itself, a region of breathtaking beauty, of grand architecture and perpetual autumn, a region whose entire identity, whose very soil is built over a grave so massive that the world chose to forget it. But the ghosts of Carlos do not wander castles and back rooms. They wander the vast plains where the earth is still scarred by a weapon that literally tore the soul out of the natural world. 3,000 years ago, the land of Kalos was not the peaceful kingdom it is today. It was a charnel house. A war of such brutality had consumed the region that we are never given its full name, only its duration. The 3,000-year war. The exact sides are lost to us, erased by the very length of the conflict. In this land of endless battle, there lived a king, a man named AZ, and he had a partner, a Floette, one of the fairy-like flower Pokémon. That was his closest friend, his confidant, his constant companion. The war took its toll on everyone, and eventually, the war took the life of his Floette. We do not know exactly how it died. A stray attack, disease during a siege. The details do not matter, only the consequence. Azid was shattered. He was a brilliant man, a king with resources beyond measure, and a heart broken beyond repair. He looked upon the body of his friend, and he decided he would not accept the natural order of death. Using his royal power and his genius, Gaze constructed a machine, a device unlike anything the Pokémon world has ever seen, before or since. He called it the ultimate weapon, but it was not a weapon of war, not initially. It was a resurrection machine, a device designed to reverse entropy, pull a soul back from the void, and force life into a body that had already surrendered it. The technology was incomprehensible. Where does one find the energy to undo death? The energy required to stop the universe from moving forward is astronomical. Azid could not find that energy in the earth, or the sky, or the fire. He looked to the creatures around him, and he made a choice. The life force of a single Pokémon powers its own existence. The life force of thousands, of millions, perhaps even more, could power a miracle. Azid designed the weapon to consume the very souls of Pokémon. He built a machine that ran on genocide, and he fired it. The weapon detonated, conjuring a massive pillar of light that pierced the heavens over what is now Giasenji town. It worked. His Floette came back, but the Floette that returned was not the same. It had been touched by death. Its flower, once a vibrant red, had become an eternal blue-white, the eternal flower, a sign of its passage through the afterlife. But the horror of the resurrection was far deeper than a colour change. The Floette looked at its master and understood what he had done. The blood on his hands, the millions of voices silenced so that one voice could speak again. The machine was not just a resurrection device. It was a justification for itself. The war that had raged for 3,000 years, AZ ended it in one moment. Using the ultimate weapon as a weapon, he turned the machine that brought back his friend into a global execution device. He did not just kill his enemies, he erased them. He turned an entire army to stone. The battlefield of Kalos became a museum of the damned, but the Floette could not live with what its life had cost. It abandoned Azid. The love that had caused the end of the world was now a solitary grief, and Az the king was left standing in the ashes. This is the genocide at the heart of the Pokémon world, the horrifying truth that every single peaceful moment in Kalos, perhaps in the entire modern Pokémon world, is built on the still smoking remains of that day. How did the world forget? How does a disaster of this magnitude disappear from history within a few generations? The official explanation is time. 3,000 years is a long time, but for a catastrophe that reshaped the planet, it seems remarkably short. The more likely explanation is deliberate erasure. The Pokémon League, or whoever governed the region in the immediate aftermath, saw the weapon and the war as a shameful scar. The truth of how AZ created it was too dangerous. The idea that Pokémon life force could be extracted and weaponized was a knowledge that could not be allowed to exist. So the world did what it does best. It papered over the grave. Giasenji town was rebuilt. The stone soldiers were left to erode in the fields, dismissed as natural rock formations. The story of the king who loved a Floette became a fairy tale, a bedtime story. The truth was too heavy. The concept of a peaceful world built on the remains of a genocide was too contradictory for the human mind to hold, so it was let go. but not by the ghosts. The eternal flower Floette has never left. It wanders the world now, a silent witness to the cost of love and ambition, a ghost that can never move on. It cannot be captured. It cannot be caught in a standard Pokéball. It exists entirely outside the cycle of training and battle that defines the modern Pokémon world. It is the morality of a forgotten age, a living question. Every time a trainer captures a Pokémon, every time a battle is fought, one has to wonder if the echo of that weapon is still vibrating, if the soul of the world is still healing from that wound. This idea of a foundational contradiction, a beautiful surface hiding a terrible reality, becomes even more surreal when we look at the future, or rather, the past. In the most recent generation, the Pokémon world introduced creatures that look like old friends, but they are something entirely else. They are not from this time. They are not from a time that should exist at all. They challenge the very linearity of reality itself. If the ultimate weapon was a scar on the soul of the world, these Paradox Pokémon are scars on the fabric of time itself. They are fragments of impossible eras, brought into our present by a force we still do not understand, and the mystery of what they truly are, of what they imply about the very nature of this universe, is a story for our next chapter. The weapon in Kalos was fired 3,000 years ago, and it turned the bones of Pokémon into fuel for a war machine. That act of absolute destruction, the forced sacrifice of countless lives to power a device that could revive the dead, stands as the darkest moment in recorded Pokémon history. But what if I told you that the Pokémon world has since discovered a way to do something even more unnatural? Not just revive the dead, but create life from pure imagination. When Pokémon Scarlet and Violet were released in 2022, they introduced something that quietly broke the rules of biology. Creatures that looked like familiar Pokémon, but twisted into forms that should not exist. Great Tusk, for example, is a Donphan from the past. Massive, tusked, covered in ancient hide, as if it walked out of the Permian period. And then there is Iron Treads, a Donphan from the future. Sleek and metallic, with wheels instead of legs, a machine dressed in the skin of an organic creature. According to the games, these are Paradox Pokémon, beings from different eras. But the deeper you dig, the more you realize that time travel is the easy answer, and the Pokémon Company has never been comfortable with easy answers. The problem is that these creatures violate the known fossil record. In the Paldea region, there are no ancient deposits that match Great Tusk, no prehistoric strata containing bones of a giant Donphan. The future forms are even stranger. They cannot exist because they are composed of materials and design principles that do not align with any known technological evolution in the Pokémon world. The scientists who studied them in Area Zero, the vast crater at the heart of Paldea, were baffled. They called them Paradox because they defy the very concept of a lineage. A Pokémon cannot evolve into a form that has no ancestor and no descendant, yet here they were, walking around as if they had always belonged. The official explanation from the games points to time travel. Professor Sada in Scarlet believed she was pulling creatures from the ancient past. Professor Turo in Violet believed he was summoning beings from the distant future. They built a time machine, or so they claimed, and used it to bring these Paradox Pokémon into the present. But the machine itself is not a time machine. It is a wish-granting device. The professors did not travel through time. They used a mysterious artifact, the terrestrial phenomenon, the crystallized energy of the crater, to make their dreams real. They wanted to see the ancestors of modern Pokémon, so the machine created them. They wanted to see the descendants, so the machine built them. The Paradox Pokémon are not travelers from another era. They are living daydreams, materialized from the subconscious of a scientist. This is where the horror of the situation settles in. If the machine can create anything, then what else could it create? The professors themselves became victims of their own invention. In the climax of the game, you fight either Professor Sada or Professor Turo, depending on your version, and they are not themselves. They have been replaced by a robotic duplicate, an AI that carries out the mission of the machine. The real professor is dead, killed by the very forces they unleashed. And the AI, without a master, continues to operate the machine, pulling more Paradox Pokémon into the world. The researchers who once worked in Area Zero are silent. Their notes are locked away. The official story from the Pokémon League is that the crater is a protected zone, that the Paradox Pokémon are a natural wonder. But you can read the data logs hidden in the game, and they tell a different story. The professors were obsessed. They ignored safety protocols. They believed they were uncovering the secrets of time. They were really opening a door to the impossible. The machine, known as the time machine in the games, but more accurately described as a wish engine, sits at the bottom of Area Zero. It is powered by the same crystals that cause terrestrialization, the phenomenon that changes a Pokémon's type and appearance. Those crystals are not inert minerals. They are fragments of a greater power, something that predates the formation of Paldea itself. Ancient texts found in the region hint at a treasure that can grant desires, but at a terrible cost. The machine is that treasure, weaponized by modern science, and it is still running. What does this mean for the natural order of Pokémon? Think about it. If a machine can create living creatures out of thought, then the entire concept of evolution, of breeding, of life itself becomes meaningless. A Pokémon is no longer defined by its parents or its environment. It is defined by human imagination. The Paradox Pokémon are just the beginning. In the game's post-game, you can encounter more of them, each one more bizarre than the last. Walking Wake, a Suicune from a prehistoric age with a serpentine neck. Iron Leaves, a Virizion from a future where it has become a blade of pure metal. These are not adaptations. They are inventions. Someone dreamed them, and the machine made them real. The danger is not that these creatures exist. The danger is that they can be created again by anyone who understands the machine. The professors left no fail-safe. Their notes are scattered, but they are not destroyed. And the Pokémon League, in its infinite wisdom, has chosen to bury the truth rather than destroy the device. They have sealed the crater, but they have not turned off the machine. It hums beneath the earth, waiting for another wish. And somewhere, in a hidden lab or a forgotten archive, a researcher might be reading those notes, wondering what else could be imagined. The Pokémon world has always been a place where the line between myth and reality is thin, but with the Paradox Pokémon, that line has been erased entirely. The old mysteries, the ghost at Lavender Town, the closed GS ball, the silent war, they all belong to a world where history was still a story. Now, history is whatever someone wants it to be. The machine does not care about truth. It only cares about desire. And that leads us to the next question, one that lies at the heart of every unsolved mystery we have discussed. If a creature can exist because it is believed in, then what else is out there, waiting to be dreamed into life? What happens when the imagination of a child, or the nightmare of a sleeping world, takes shape in the dark? The answer may already be walking among us, wearing the skin of a Pokémon we thought we knew. That is the true paradox. The more we learn, the less we understand. And that is exactly where we need to go next. Into the philosophy of the unknown. The Paradox Pokémon of Paldea presented us with a profound philosophical contradiction. Creatures from a past that never was, and a future that may never come to pass. They are entities born not from time, but from the sheer force of human imagination, crystallized into pixels by a machine that could only interpret wishes, never verify history. And that is the precise point where the real truth of the Pokémon world begins to shimmer. It is a world built not on solid foundations of documented history, but on a deliberate tapestry of voids, of silences, of questions that have been left standing, untouched, for the simple reason that an answer would diminish them. The Paradox Pokémon feel strange, not just because of their design, but because they represent the raw, unfiltered of myth-making. The ancient past is unknowable, the distant future is uncertain, and the Pokémon franchise has built its entire mythology on that same principle of fertile uncertainty. We sit here, decades into this journey, still asking the same questions we whispered to ourselves in 1996. Why is there a ghost in the tower? What is inside the GS ball? Who is Ash Ketchum's father? The answers have never come, and I have come to believe, after all this time, that this is not a flaw in the storytelling. This is the entire point of the story itself. The Pokémon franchise is an exercise in institutional silence. From the very first games, the developers placed walls around their deepest truths. Lavender Town's music is discordant, its tower is haunted, but the specific tragedy that left those souls in limbo is never named. The dead are allowed to rest, but for their unrest is a mystery, deliberately withheld from the player. In storytelling, this space is called the Void. It is the empty patch on the map where a settlement should be. It is the gap in the historical record that strongly implies a war. It is the missing dialogue where a ghost should speak. The Void is deeply uncomfortable. It invites the player to step forward into the silence and fill it with their own mind. Consider the GS ball. For more than 20 years, that golden sphere has sat in an anime character's home, a sealed promise. We know from interviews that a developer stated it was meant to contain Celebi, but a film schedule changed. The narrative was abandoned. The ball never opened. In the strictest sense, this is a broken story, a loose thread. And yet, in the hearts of the fandom, it's become a sacred artifact. Because the closed sphere contains infinite possibilities. It holds every legendary creature that could have been sealed inside. It is a vessel for pure potential, for the quiet dream that some stories are too vast to be told, and must instead be merely as a presence in the room. The same principle applies to the armor of Cubone. The Pokédex itself states that what lurks inside the shell is a total mystery. The developers have had multiple generations, multiple chances to peel back that armor and reveal the truth. They chose intentionally to preserve the sanctity of the unknown. Why? Because a factual revelation would likely diminish the creature. The deeply tragic fan theory of the mother's skull is just that, a theory. But it is a theory so emotionally potent, so resonant with the themes of loss and survival, that it has become the accepted truth in the hearts of millions. A fully explained Cubone would be a biology lesson. A mysterious Cubone is a poem, and poetry lasts longer than data. This brings us to the core concept of lore for sleep. Why do we find such deep comfort in the melancholic and the mysterious? Why do unsolved mysteries make us feel safe, contemplative and drowsy, rather than frustrated and awake? I believe it is because the unknown returns us to a state of being where the world was larger than our understanding of it. As children, the world was full of secrets, the dark hallway, the creaking floorboard, the forest at night. These were spaces of immense wonder and manageable terror. As we age, the world gets mapped. Science explains the creek. Light illuminates the hallway. The forest is just a collection of trees. But the Pokémon world is a sanctuary from that mapping. It refuses to fully illuminate its own darkness. The ghost girl in Kalos, the glitch of MissingNo, the silent father in Pallet Town. These are not failures of execution. They are intentional architecture. They are the high walls of a cathedral, built specifically to house the beautiful, frightening mystery of existence. Reflecting on why the Pokémon franchise thrives on these unsolved mysteries, we have to acknowledge that the world of Pokémon is not a puzzle box to be unlocked. It is an ocean to be explored, and the deepest parts of that ocean are the ones with the least light. The beauty of the Void in storytelling is that it transforms the player from a passive spectator into an active co-creator. The game hands you a skeleton, just a handful of scattered bones, and your imagination is tasked with building the flesh, the sinew, and the soul upon it. This is the ultimate act of trust between a story and its audience. The developers are essentially saying, "We do not have all the answers. We cannot provide closure for every ghost, but we trust you. We trust you to find meaning in the absence. We trust you to dream in the dark." A fully explained Pokémon world. Can you conceive of it? Every Pokédex entry finalized, every ancient war documented in full, every ghost identified by name and origin, every sealed ball opened for the world to see. What would be left of the magic? Just a database, a museum of preserved facts with no emotional humidity. The soul of this franchise, the beating heart of its mythology, lies entirely in the shadow cast by the object, not the object itself. The developers of Game Freak, whether through brilliant design or the happy accident of memory limitations, understood that the most powerful story is the one the player tells themselves. The child who picked up Red and Blue in 1996 and saw the ghost in the tower felt a genuine chill. That chill was not caused by a sprite. It was caused by the profound silence surrounding the sprite, the void, the chill. And for nearly 30 years, we have been drifting back to that same silence, searching for that exact same feeling of peaceful wonder. There is a profound comfort in admitting that not everything is known. It is the same comfort one finds in lying on the grass and looking up at a starry sky, feeling simultaneously small and deeply connected. It is the comfort of letting go of the need for resolution. The melancholic, the mysterious, the unresolved. These are not heavy burdens in a narrative. They are soft blankets. They allow the mind to drift, to wander, to cease its frantic search for answers, and simply rest in the quiet beauty of the question itself. That is the true magic that has sustained this world for nearly 30 years. The franchise is not afraid to be quiet. It is not afraid to leave the lights off in certain rooms. But what about the rooms where the lights were never installed? What happens when the silence is not just a passive backdrop, but an active presence? There are stories in this world that are not just unanswered. They are ghosts not of a person, but of the very code that powers the reality we traverse. From the fractured data of MissingNo to the cold logic of artificial intelligence in abandoned laboratories, the boundary between the creator and the created has become dangerously thin. And in that blurred space, something has begun to stir. Something that is not a myth, not a legend, but a fundamental glitch in the nature of consciousness itself. This brings us inevitably to the threshold of the next chamber, to the entities that haunt the digital heart of the Pokémon world. This is the story of the ghosts in the machine, and so we arrive at the final analysis. The void is not empty. It is filled with the weight of what was never said. The Pokémon world, for all its vibrant colours and creature comforts, has always been a haunted place. Not because of the ghosts that appear on screen, but because of the silences that linger between the lines of code. The institutional silence is not a flaw in the storytelling. It is the story, and it tells us something profound about our own role in this universe. We have explored the abandoned power plant, the ghost girl who drifts between regions, the crimes of an ancient war, and creatures that defy time itself. In every case, the games, the anime and the developers have chosen not to answer. They have built a world rich with detail, but they have deliberately left the cellar doors locked. And what lurks behind those doors is not a monster that can be battled or captured. It is the absence of an answer. That absence becomes a presence. It becomes a ghost. The phrase institutional silence describes the hidden policy of the Pokémon world's governing bodies. The League, the international police, even the ancient kings of Kalos, they withhold the truth. They bury the records. They let the questions fester. But think about who is really silenced. We are the player, the trainer, the observer. We walk through these regions. We speak to every NPC. We read every bookcase, and still we are left with gaps. The gaps are not empty spaces. They are deliberately crafted voids. They are there to make us feel something. And what we feel is the tragedy of being an outsider. You are not a citizen of the Pokémon world. You are a traveller. You arrive in Lavender Town, and you sense the grief in the music. But you will never know the names of those buried there. You hold the GS ball in your inventory for the entire Yoto journey, but you will never see what is inside. You encounter the ghost in the Pokémon Tower, but you cannot speak to it. It only cries. The game never translates that cry. You are left to interpret a sound that has no dictionary, That is the condition of being a ghost yourself. Consider the mechanics. In the original games, the player is a silent protagonist. They never speak a line of dialogue. They only move, select, and battle. Their silence is absolute. And in that silence, the player projects their own thoughts onto the world. But the world does not project back. It remains opaque. The Pokéball compresses a creature into light, but the science is never explained. Cubone's skull hides an inner face that the Pokédex refuses to show. The white hand that was allegedly hidden in the code of Pokémon Red and Green, a sprite of a decaying, skeletal hand, was removed before release, or so the creepypasta says. Whether it existed or not does not matter. The story of its removal is itself a ghost story. It is a myth about a thing that was almost seen, and the player, the ghost in the machine, can only imagine what it looked like. We are ghosts because the world, but we cannot touch its history. We can heal our Pokémon at the Pokémon Center, but we cannot heal the wound of a war that is never mentioned. We can visit the graves in Lavender Town, but we cannot lay flowers on a specific one because the graves are unnamed. We can walk through the ruins of the ultimate weapon, but the skeletons have been swept away. The only evidence of the suffering is the silence of the NPCs who refuse to talk about it, and we, the players, drift through these spaces like spectres, picking up fragments of a story that was never meant for us. The most haunting images of the Pokémon world are not the ghostly sprites themselves. They are the objects that remain inert. The GS ball sits on a shelf in Kurt's house in Azalea Town. If you return to the anime, you realize that the ball was simply forgotten. The writers moved on. The ball became a relic of a plot thread that died. It is a memorial to a promise that was broken by the creators. The white hand, if it ever existed, is a similar relic, a fragment of an earlier version of the game that was discarded, but whose rumor persists like a phantom limb. And the skyline of Lavender Town, with the tower rising against a purple dusk, is the backdrop for all of these absences. It is the graveyard of answers. The tower is a physical manifestation of the silence. It has floors and floors of graves, but no epitaphs. The ghosts that roam it are not named. Even the ghost that blocks your path, the one that forces you to retrieve the Pokédex and the Sylph Scope, is never identified. It is the spirit of a Marowak, but the game never says who's Marowak. The most tragic possibility is that it is the mother of the Cubone you can catch later, but the game does not confirm that either. The silence is maintained, and because of that silence, the story belongs to you. You have to decide what happened. You have to carry the weight of the interpretation. That is the enduring power of the things that remain unsaid in the dark. They do not fade, they grow. An explained mystery is a closed door. An unexplained mystery is a door that you can never stop wondering about. You can pass through it only in your imagination. But that passage becomes more real than any canon answer could be. The Pokémon franchise has sometimes tried to retroactively fill gaps. The origin of Mewtwo was clarified in the anime. The story of AZ was told in the games. But the deepest mysteries have resisted closure. They remain sealed because the developers understand that the void is sacred. So what is the final ghost in the machine? Is you. You, the player, the viewer, the one who has spent hours reading Pokédex entries and fan theories, is the only entity that can perceive the silence. The characters inside the world do not notice it. They go about their lives. They trade Pokémon. They battle for badges. But you are outside. You are looking through a screen at a world that cannot see you. You are the observer that cannot be observed. You are the ghost that haunts the game. You are the one who keeps the mysteries alive by refusing to forget them, and that is why you are still here, listening to a story about stories that were never finished. You are not looking for answers. You know they will never come. You are here for the feeling of standing at the edge of a cliff and looking into a fog that never lifts. There is a strange comfort in that fog. It is a space that remains your own. The developers gave you a world, but they gave you the freedom to imagine the shadows within it. The GS ball will never open. The white hand will never be confirmed. Lavender Town will always be a skyline of lost souls, and you will always be the one who sees them. That is the final mystery. Not what is inside the ball, not what lies beneath the skull, not who the ghost girl was before she died. The final mystery is that you care. You care about a world that does not know you exist. And in that care, the ghosts become real. The silence becomes a voice. And the machine, for just a moment, becomes a home for something that was never meant to be understood. There is peace in that. There is a lullaby in the unsaid. So let the questions rest. Let the tower stand. Let the ball remain closed. The story does not need an end. It needs only a witness. And you have been that witness. Close your eyes. The ghosts are not here to frighten you. They are here to remind you that some things are more beautiful when they remain unknown. Good night. The silence is yours. What did you think of this journey? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this changed your perspective or taught you something new, consider subscribing for more mind-expanding content. And if you know someone who would find this as fascinating as you did, share it with them. These are the kind of conversations that matter.